Hey everybody, Corona Rob here. Look who's back with me again for our annual video. Matt Hugh.
It's Matt.
How's it going, dude?
Yeah. Good, good, good. I'm
Nice.
excited to get cooking.
Yeah, get booking, yeah. It's always this is always a big treat. I've said it a million times to you, but I always enjoy this. It's like the big roundup video of the year of all the books we read, and it's so appropriate I think that we do it together because there's so many, especially this year. I think you and I read more books together than we ever have, which was really fun.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm pretty sure we easily cleared 100 between us for
Oh
sure.
yeah, I think so. Yep, yeah. And so it's always fun, like talking about books, exchanging books, all those things. So for those who don't know, welcome. This is our annual book video. Matt and I always read a ton of books throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, we do a video like this, and we talk about everything that we read and stuff that we want to read next year, stuff maybe we would have liked to have read, all that stuff. I got the Santa sweater on, as I always do for these videos. We're ready to go. Oh, and I also have this lovely coffee. Uh, it's called Double Up. Never had it before. Coffee milk stout, 6.5%. So
Very good.
I'll have energy and tipsy energy. So there you go.
Nice. I've got milk foam mango tea.
Oh, nice. You're going the that looks really good. Um,
The place is actually really close too, so next time you visit, we can take you.
quick
They do
little.
bubble tea,
Ooh,
do milk tea.
ooh, that sounds good. There's a place around here too. We should take you. It's really, really good. They have these fruit teas like that where they have pieces of fruit on the bottom and stuff. So good,
Ooh,
so good.
nice.
That's really good. If you like a nice stout, very good. Anyway, that aside, I'm just trying to make the video even longer this year because they're
Yeah,
always like
exactly.
over 2 hours.
I've had this out.
So that aside, so what this video is effectively is it's our top 10 books that we read this year. However, it's also many other things. It gets more convoluted than that. We do honorable mentions, we do all kinds of stuff. So I sent you a list, Matt, as I always do, of different questions to answer about the books we read. And then at the end, after we do our top tens, all that stuff, we're gonna just do some like looking ahead type of stuff. So we're gonna talk about books that we want to read and series we want to read, all of those things. So strap in, folks. Enjoy a nice beverage. Get ready for basically a theatrical length Lord of the Rings video. Cheers.
Hopefully, hopefully. As in, hopefully it's not longer than that.
Yeah, hopefully not. We'll see. Hopefully our children stay asleep. Okay, so I want to start out, Matt, and very simply, like, I know you don't do this. You've said this in the past, in previous videos, that you don't really like to set a goal for amount of books that you read every year because you don't want to put pressure on yourself, which I totally respect. I always,
No.
I have a Goodreads, so I really keep track of everything on Goodreads. Like, I update books that I'm currently reading and all that stuff. And I always track how many books I've read and all that, and then I'm able to rate them. But they also let you set a goal on Goodreads, so I kind of have like a
Okay.
little progress bar through the year that I get to look at to see how close I am to hitting my goal. Anyway, my goal is
That,
always 50 books. So,
oh,
um,
all right. Well, you're not incrementally increasing it and like driving yourself nuts. That's not bad. That's pretty reasonable.
well, the first year in recent years, so I should say really briefly, I got back into reading in a big way 2020. It just happened to coincide with COVID. I was consciously making the decision before COVID to start reading more, and then because of COVID, there was all this extra time, and then I started getting really into science fiction, like classic science fiction, and then I got back into fantasy, which I've always really been into. I believe I think I had just started rereading The Wheel of Time, right
Nice.
before COVID, a few months before or something. So I started reading again, and then I was like, I'm gonna start reading more. And then as I got through 2020, I'm like, I'm gonna try to read 50 books this year. I read I think 52, but I've not been able to top that. I've not been even been able to make 50. So, and I didn't this year either.
I
I
love
got
that.
49 books.
Oh no! Oh, come on. That's so frustrating.
I tried so hard to like slip. My first book that I read this year, which is a little spoiler for next year, is I read Old Man and the Sea because I was looking up what's the shortest books that I could read to just squeeze another one in, and it was goddamn Wind of Truth, man. I couldn't squeeze it in because Wind of Truth was so big. So we'll talk about that later, but yeah, so I couldn't quite make 50 books, so that was a little disappointing, but I got so close this year. So next year, or I got so close last year. This year, 2025. Well, how many did you read this year?
Okay, let me pull up the note here. It's not too much over 50. I actually just finished the count today. That was the one thing I checked all the criteria you sent me that I hadn't done. I did 53. So it's not like I crossed that threshold by much.
That's great, yeah.
I want to preface this with saying I did read a few different short story collections too, so I feel like those, like, nothing against them, but they're genuinely quicker reads for the most part because each story is like way more digestible. So
I always count shorter books, even if it's like 100 pages or sometimes even less. The reason I do that is, and I know this counts for you, but I'll read a few books that are, say, 100 pages or 150 pages, something real short, or even less than 100. But then I read these chonkers that are like over 1,000, and to me it balances itself out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because reading, just for example, reading like, do I have it on me? Oh, it's down here. Like, okay, there's this, and then this. They're both books. You know what I mean? But one is much larger. So to me, it's like you can't really base it on solely, the size of the book. So anyway, so you did 53 this year. That's really good.
Yeah.
Last year you had said to me, you were saying, oh, I think it's going to be a lot less this coming year because you were expecting your daughter, and it's funny, you ended up reading a decent amount.
Yeah, let me actually see if I can find out how many I read last year. I think I still have the note in my phone.
I think it was 56. That's what I'm guessing. I think you had read 56, or maybe it was closer to 60.
Measurements, books. Come on, where is it? Up top 23. Yeah, here we go. Series. Sorry, chat. Oh wow, Rob, you should play the lottery. It was 55 to 56. I think I was teetering on something, but that was pretty good memory, man. Jeez.
Yeah, I recently watched the video. Not super recently, but it was maybe a month ago or something like that. So.
Got it.
So we both did really well. You called it. We did about 100 books between us, which is pretty awesome. So okay, so we both did around 50. Let's go. Okay. So my first question for you will be, what is your favorite series that you read this year?
I technically have two. I would say just because of how high...
Oh, sorry. If I may preface it, I just want to say a complete series, if possible. Like, so if you didn't read the full series, I wouldn't count it. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, but I technically did for both, so that doesn't really change.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the the whole Shannara sequence, and then the Three Body Problem trilogy, which is officially called Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, but online I see people just call it the Three Body trilogy, even though it's only the first book that's called the Three Body Problem.
Yeah.
But they were both phenomenal. I feel like the only reason why Shannara gets the edge is just because there was so many of them that I still had to read this year, and like fantasy is probably my favorite genre.
Yeah.
And 2 out of like my top 10 were like 2 sequences from that bigger set. And then, I'm not going to say where on the list the other one was, but they're all really high on the list. So
nice.
Definitely the Shannara series by Terry Brooks, and then the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu, which
Very
I
cool.
think I pronounced the name right.
I have the Three Body Problem. I'm going to at least try to read the first one this year because I've had it for a while.
It stands alone well enough, honestly. They all do, which is good.
Usually the first you can get away with that with the first book in a series. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. So you got a nice sci-fi series and a nice fantasy series.
In fact, that's yeah. No, my top 10 this year is a little more balanced. I think I didn't take a look at my last top 10, even though it was in that note I was just looking at.
Hmm.
But there's it's. I feel like last year it might have been more straight up fantasy, and then this year there's more of a mix. So
Yeah,
that's
more of a mix.
cool.
Yeah. I feel like one genre did, just off the top of my head, I think dominated mine a little this year, but mine's also pretty mixed,
Mhm.
which is nice. For me, I'm gonna justify this one. Um, I don't think I have to justify it. My big reread this year was the Stormlight Archive. Uh, Now I usually don't count rereads. However, this came out, and I also had never read Edge Dancer,
Mhm.
Dawn Shard, and I also read The Sunlit Man, which are all considered part of the Stormlight Archive. So, given that there was all of that extra material, I kind of just went, it has to be Stormlight. I did my big Stormlight reread. I reread everything. Actually, I started the year reading Arcanium Unbounded. So, I read Edge Dancer in the very beginning of 2024. And then I started my Stormlight read with Way of Kings in August, and that took me right up until the very end of December. Uh, I'll be honest. I didn't finish Wind and Truth until January 1st, so I was reading it
Same,
slightly
same.
into 2025, but I'm still counting it because we're talking about like 100 pages against like 1,300. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
literally putting binding to its limit.
yeah. So
I seriously.
go ahead. Sorry.
I wonder if book 6 is literally going to have to be two separate books, honestly, at this point.
I kind of hope it goes back to shortening it a bit, like the first, because it's the next sort of start of it.
True, and he'll have so long to kind of figure out what he wants to do. True.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. But yeah. Anyway, for me, the big one was Stormlight because it dominated half my year. And that's on
Yeah,
audiobook, listening to it a lot at work. So like these books are chonkers. I'm not going to be revisiting this world probably at least until book 6. So it was a big year for me for Stormlight. So that was definitely my series of the year.
nice. I would say so. I only reread Rhythm of War, though. That was
Oh,
the
okay.
only Stormlight I've never reread, but I will say that I definitely enjoyed it a lot more the second time around. Although I did really enjoy it the first time around, for sure. I can get more into that later, but
Yeah, we could talk
yeah,
about that more later. I also enjoyed it a lot more the second time around, which was nice. Um, okay, so what was your favorite short story that you read?
ooh, okay. Let me see, because some of these it was in the Alan Moore collection, the famous Alan Moore collection that like you got a lot of messages for me about.
Yeah, that
The
was
short story.
entertaining.
Yeah, it's called Illuminations. I specifically had the Broken Binding edition of that. It was on sale for like really, really cheap. I got it for like £5. So even with the astronomical shipping from overseas, it still ended up being pretty cheap in the long run. But uh, my favorite short story in that collection was called Location, Location, Location.
Hmm.
And basically, it was like the rapture happened, and Jesus comes back, he's reborn, and he's treating basically the rapture like it's a company takeover, like his dad has like retired and now he has to
Yeah.
take over the company. There's like only like one person left in all of like Great Britain, and he's talking to her because she's basically like the executor of this like company changeover. And I don't know, just the language and the symbolism and stuff, it's just really absurd, and it reminded me a lot of Good Omens.
Oh, okay.
I forget, have you read Good Omens? Because if you haven't,
No,
you should. It's
I was gonna
fantastic.
add a Neil Gaiman book this year because I've only read American Gods, so maybe I'll add that. It's either gonna be that one or what's the other one? Stardust, I think I have. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
one
another
of
thing.
those I'll read. I'll maybe read this year because but yeah, I know the premise of Good Omens, that it's kind of like
Yeah,
a
it's
funny
very
take.
silly.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, location, location, location reminded me of that. There's a lot of that silly British humor in it, and
yeah.
no, it honestly made me laugh like out loud a few times. And it was like a pretty short story.
It's nice to have stories like that to break things up, especially when you do these
Yeah.
big epics, and then it can get like as great, as awesome and cool as they are. Sometimes you just need that. Like January is my post. It's like Stormlight was the big orgasm, and now it's like the post-coital period in January. I'm just trying to read shorter things, all that kind of thing, like just to kind of relax a little bit, just vary it up. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
I almost did a spit take there.
Yeah.
That was like a genuine reaction. No, but it's funny though, because at the same time, that Alan Moore short story collection was such a mixed bag for me, and maybe it was not a great idea for me to start reading an author like the first thing I read from them was a short story collection.
Hmm.
Like it was weird. There were stories in there I absolutely loved, like this one. There were some that made me scratch my head, and then like I said, I still count this because the only two things I didn't read, like there was like I want to say like almost 10 short stories, maybe there's more than 10, and the last two were like written in a play format. And I have a hard time reading something like that like from the get-go. I tried and I couldn't do it. But yeah, kind of a mixed bag, but I do have the Jerusalem trilogy from him and I do have Watchmen. I love the film. And a lot of people say it's one of the best graphic novels of all time, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I own it, so
I hear a
I've
lot
got
of
two
good
more.
things about him. Well, as a writer, not necessarily as a person. I hear the opposite about
Yeah,
him as a person, but like apparently he writes good stuff. So I'll have to read
yeah.
something by him at some point.
Yeah, let me put it to you this way. One of the stories in Illuminations is literally about cosmic brains at the start of the Big Bang. Like the universe is created. It's literally cosmic brains banging. There's no other way to explain it. Literally, he wrote a story about like primordial like cosmic brains winking. I don't know. I read it and I couldn't tell you what the heck was happening. Like it was just a total like pun intended like mind fuck. It
That's
was
pretty
I don't know.
awesome.
It was that's if I don't think that's a category we had. But if I had to choose the most bizarre story I read this year, it would be the brain fucking for
That's gonna have
sure.
to be a category next year. The most
Yeah,
bizarre story you read. I mean, we could even make it one this year. I could probably think of something off the top of my head. But yeah, yeah, that's funny. That sounds Alan Moore sounds like a weird guy and writes some very
yeah.
weird things. Um, for me, for short stories, had a I'm gonna talk about two of them. One
Okay.
is Secret History, which is
Yay.
from Arcadium Unbounded. I don't want to talk all like. There's not gonna be much more about Brandon. I'm gonna say except when we get to a certain book. Um, but if when I think about it objectively, yeah, Secret History, from Mistborn, for those who don't know, was probably the best one that I read. But um, I did also read a short story collection by Ray Bradbury, and he is one of the best short story writers. So I had to mention something by him, and I'm mentioning the story "The Next in Line." It's from
Ooh.
it's from. I'll talk about this in a second too. It's from. Of course, I dropped it. It's from this collection, The October Country, and
Oh, I didn't realize that short story collection.
yep.
Okay,
If you want, you could borrow it sometime. But it's all it's all like kind of horror, or at least kind of close to horror, like sort of spooky October feeling.
yeah. Well,
Matt,
Halloween season.
this is another theme of this year. But like I read a lot of horror. I've read a lot of horror at this point. I've seen a lot of horror, and not much scares me. This story, like, just for whatever reason, gave me the chills, and I don't know
Wow.
why. It just happened to hit me the wrong, or the right way, however you want to say. And there was a certain scene, like, certain way he wrote about something in this story, where I was just like, ooh, it just gave me the willies, which like that rarely happens. So to me, I was like, I have to. Like to have that kind of emotional response to it, I have to mention it because it was great, and just in general this was a great short story collection. So, yeah, I'd say that one for the horror thing, and then actually I guess so. Yeah, I guess Secret History would be fantasy, and then if I were to say maybe off the top of my head like a science fiction short story, um, oh, I don't know. I read one called The Game of Rat and Dragon off of this collection from this guy named Cordwainer Smith. Pretty hit or miss for me, but the short story was pretty interesting. It's He's a writer from like the 50s, 60s. And it was like that Alan Moore thing. It was this weird mind fuck. It was like people were like telepathically communicating with cats to fight like these entities in like warp or something, and it was really weird, but it was really good, and it was a short story. So there's 3 of them for you. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really weird. So let's see. Okay. Oh, okay. We both might as well answer this one. The biggest turd,
I know.
The biggest turd or disappointment,
Okay,
or even just least favorite.
Let us preface this by saying you would probably agree with me. It's a series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Like, we both read, like, Children of Time, Children of Ruin, Children of Memory fairly recently. Just, like, within last year to, like,
2 years.
Pretty much.
I think I read Children of Time 2 years ago, something like that.
Same.
Maybe even 3.
I think
doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, Children of Time is one of the best things I've ever read. Highly recommend it. I don't even want to spoil anything. Read it. It's I would say it's just as revolutionary as like something like Clark or Timeline would have written.
It's a modern sci-fi classic, and we talked about it extensively. I think the last 2 videos we did. So if you watch those videos, you won't be surprised.
Yeah, we're not gonna blab, but yeah, this series was not our cup of tea, and I don't know what it is. I think now that I really think about it, my main problem with it is there's quite a few different characters, but there's just enough of them, and I feel like not enough like plot or like backstory with them. Like he there's a bunch of different aliens and a bunch of different characters, but it's like you never quite like you get their personalities, but I don't know. I'm a lore junkie.
Yeah.
And like I just feel like there wasn't enough there for all the various like alien species. Like without getting into too much spoilers, this is like a future where these entities come and they're destroying planets with sentient life. It's not just humans, it's like other alien worlds too, and nobody knows why they do it. And there was a big war with these things like 50 years ago.
The architects.
And they defeated them.
Yeah.
And shenanigans ensue, and I finished the series. Rob didn't. He couldn't get through book 2. But after reading the whole trilogy, I'm like, this probably could have been 2 books, like 2 really, really long books.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like a lot of the story there was just didn't end up meaning a whole lot by the end of book 3, personally.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like Rob and I are like both curious because it seems like it was like really well regarded, and I'm like, I don't know. I didn't really have a good time with it. I kind of forced myself to get through book 2, but then during the climax of book 2, I was definitely invested enough to at least finish it, and I'm glad I did. Like I told Rob, I don't know if I'm ever gonna reread them.
We didn't say what the series was. It's The Final Architecture.
Yeah.
By Adrian Tchaikovsky, and we had talked about actually when we did our last video, we were excited to read it because we were gonna remember. I don't know if you remember, but we talked about it and we're like, we're gonna try to read the Final Architecture trilogy. That was one of the big series we were going to do together.
Yes,
and, I don't know about you. I was excited at first. I felt like it started out strong, maybe the first section or 2. And then it just, like, kind of got really dull. And then the ending was okay. And then by about a little over halfway through the second book, I found myself, because I audiobooked all of them. And we read them together, by the way, if we hadn't said that. But, I had anyway, I was audiobooking them, and by the second one, I found that I kept turning the speed up more and more and more. And then I was realizing, like, okay, I'm not really getting much of this. I'm having a hard time paying attention to it. And it wasn't necessarily, like, I echo everything you said. It wasn't necessarily that it was bad. It was just so, like, okay and mid that it was like I almost would have rather it been terrible, because then I could have at least laughed about it. It just felt really bland. I agree with you about the characters. It kind of feels like he just threw these characters at us, and then stuff was happening to him, and he was trying to have like these emotional sort of things happening, and then it's like you didn't really care because you weren't invested in the characters.
Yeah, and you know what? Now you bring that up, it's like they did a lot of like tell not show, like like a big the cast of characters. This is like this crew of like spacers who like they basically sounds like they're like treasure hunters slash trash people. They go into deep space and
Yep.
collect stuff that might been abandoned or lost. And we're told they're super close. And don't get me wrong, you see some of it during the story, but it's like I don't know, like you see some of it instead of being just told about it. I guess. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
And but that said, I liked a lot of the like there were some great premises in the book, and there were some
Oh
cool
yeah,
creatures
sure.
like alien creatures and stuff that I really liked. And but he didn't really do anything with them. And
Yeah, yeah. See, like
yeah,
there's just enough lore and cool settings and cool aliens, and then it's just like greater story of which there isn't really a whole heck of a lot of until the very end of book two,
yeah.
and halfway into book three. I don't know. I just feel like it could have been condensed a lot. And this is coming from a guy who just read Wind and Truth this year.
Yeah.
That's like 1,300 freaking pages, and to that I feel like that whole thing flowed better than that whole trilogy I
Oh,
just read.
completely, absolutely, yeah. So the Final Architecture trilogy, it seems to be well regarded. We had a hard time with it. You know, me to the point of DNFing it by midway through the second book,
Mm.
and then Matt like really trying hard to finish it and actually finishing it. So good for you for doing that.
Yeah, because it's like once I got to like the last quarter, last fifth of book two, like it wasn't too hard to at least finish that one. But then even when I started the third book for like the first 150 pages or like 200, I'm like you're left with this like huge like not necessarily cliffhanger, but like revelation at the end of book two, and
Yeah.
it's like it's frustrating because it's like I don't know. I'm not going to spoil any plot points for people that want to read this, but it just felt very frustrating, just like it was artificially padded out for
Yeah.
like
So
characters and things that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of the grander plot.
yeah, it kind of seemed like it was going that way. I remember even in the first book, it just felt that way. So I'm not really surprised that it ended up that way. You know. So Adrian Tchaikovsky, if you ever see this, love you, buddy. You done some really really great work. That's not one of them. But
Yeah,
it's okay.
at least in our humble opinions.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
in my
I,
opinion, yeah.
I definitely read way worse for sure.
Oh, same. That's the problem. It's very like meh, you know, and
Yeah.
it wasn't. It just didn't hold my interest. Anyway, so that was our biggest turd, collectively. The Final Architecture by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Did you reread any books, and what was your favorite reread?
Literally only reread one, and it was Rhythm of War. So I guess it would be Rhythm of War. But like I said, I did really enjoy it more the second time.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why I struggled so much with the first time, besides like, is like that book also kind of I feel like suffers from like plot stalling.
Yeah.
Really not going to get into specifics, especially because this is a big series. I don't
This is
wanna
book
ruin anything
4 of
for anyone.
Stormlight Archive, so you got to go pretty deep into it.
Yeah, but besides plot points, like for greater story building, two of the main characters of the whole series, they are at literally their lowest points in the whole franchise. And
Yep.
at least on the second reread, I knew how things were gonna end up, so it wasn't as depressing to read about. But it
Yeah.
was, I felt like I was able to get a better handle on some of the mechanics they introduced and started explaining in this, and I was able to pick up on a little more foreshadowing and things like that this time.
Yeah, same. Especially
through it.
now after reading Wind and Truth.
Yeah.
That book also suffered to me from like because I also reread that this year, obviously because I did the whole Stormlight thing. It also suffered for me with too much exposition on I guess technically it's the magic system, but like that that whole back and forth between Navani and Raboniel, and they're going on and on about light. And it's like when you first read that, you're like, what are they going on about? I don't care at a certain point. And then now that I've reread it, it's like I kind of within the context of it, I kind of like, okay, that makes sense. I appreciate it more because I think it's like you said, you know what the plot is going to be and how it's going to end up now. So you're not waiting at the edge of your seat like what's going to happen next? I don't fucking care about light. Like tell me like what's going to happen with these characters, you know?
Yeah.
So now like the second time it was more interesting because I was like, oh, okay, so it made the read better. So yeah, I agree with you.
It sets up major like in-world implications that we already see both in that book And you actually see a lot of it in Wind and Truth because it's a thing they constantly talk about and they worry about. And definitely not going to spoil that because that would literally take the wind out of the sails of like the entire buildup of that particular arc in book 4. So, but I
Yeah.
think you know what I mean. So,
Oh, of course, of course. Okay. Um. Oh, and for my favorite reread, I couldn't decide between two, to be quite honest with you. I'm not gonna count Stormlight because I've talked enough about Stormlight. I kind of was
that's
thinking
fair.
within the realm of individual books. I reread
Oh, okay.
a few books. And there's two I'm gonna just talk about real quick, and it gives me this is my little showcasing. I want to also just show a book that I got for Christmas here because
Ooh.
these are all really cool. So one that I actually read actually both of these books, these rereads I did with Rachel. So shout out to you, sweetie. I did read a couple books with Rachel this year, and of course because it's Rachel and I, we did classic science fiction. So the first one I read over the summer, I was actually away visiting my sister and brother-in-law and all them in South Carolina, and I read The Chrysalids. And this
Ooh,
is
I
a
like.
really nice copy I got for Rachel 2 birthdays ago, I think. So yeah, The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. I love John Wyndham. He's one of my very favorite classic science fiction authors. Um, oh, also, this is my favorite kind of book. The hardback is the same as
Ooh,
yeah.
cool. Oh, I like those end papers too.
Yeah, you like? Oh, I'll show it to you. Yeah, this was cheap. It's at a place called Indigo in
Nice.
Canada. Yeah, nice. Pretty simple, but it's cheap. Lovely little copy.
Not to
Anyway,
say that's kind of cool that you bought that in Canada too, because it's like that story takes place in a
yeah,
Canadian province. So.
yeah. Basically, yep. It basically takes place in further east than
Oh,
where
yeah.
we are. But anyway, so The Chrysalids. For those who haven't read it, it is top tier science fiction, classic science fiction. John Wyndham is just one of the masters. I've loved everything I've read by him, and this is just an amazing story. It's a nice short read. I think I read this in less than a week, and it's just you know high concept science fiction. It's post apocalyptic, I would say.
Oh,
There's some
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's kind of like it's a weird story about these like mutant children and yeah, there's all kinds of things that he talks about, religion, all kinds of stuff. Lovely book. Highly recommend The Chrysalids. So that was one that I read that I really loved. This other one I also reread with Rachel right at the tail end of the year. It's 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. One of my very favorite science fiction books. This is brand new. I got this for Rachel for her birthday. And yeah, it's a nice little edition. She's always wanted this edition, so
Oh, nice. Good.
kind of minimalist design, but it's got that cool kind of shiny silver thing going on.
Yeah. It looks like it's foil from here anyway. That's really nice.
Yeah, so 2001: A Space Odyssey. Also, this one also I was reading into 2025, so I'm still counting it. I don't care because I read more of it, in 2024. But anyway, yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey. You guys have all probably seen the movie, or most people have seen the movie. The book is just as good, if not better, than the movie. Arthur C. Clarke is the master of science fiction. So those are mine. And then I didn't read this yet, but I just wanted to show this because I was showing off those cool classic sci-fi things. Rachel got me this for Christmas. This awesome copy of 1984.
Ooh, shiny.
Yeah. Which I really like. It's actually got a soft cover. I don't know if you could tell. It's kind of like fuzzy.
Oh, I'm wondering if it's velvet or cloth.
It's
It
sort
might be
of
cloth.
it's sort of bendy,
Oh, yeah, that could be like a partial cloth or velvet soft cover. That's interesting. See, I thought that was a hardback until you flipped it open like that.
Paper Mill Press Classics. They've done a bunch of classic books, in this kind of style.
Oh, look at that. Is there a Sonin ribbon bookmark in there too? Wow, that's really nice.
Yes, there is. Yeah, it's lovely. It's given me incentive. Like again, looking ahead into 2025. First little peek, I guess. I plan to reread 1984 because I absolutely
Ooh.
adore this book, and no book has freaked me out ever as much as this book. So there you go. So that'll be my reread for next year. Or one of them. Okay. Okay. A couple here. And then we can get to our honorable mentions. And we could try to make these quick. What were there any books you wish you read this year or last year that I keep saying this year? Or were there any books that you wish you read in 2024 that you did not?
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of horror books, mostly from Cemetery Dance Publications. It's a bit of a rabbit hole about how I found them. I was basically looking up Terry Brooks' books, and they had published one of his trilogies that's more of like a urban, like fantasy slash horror type of story. And then I started getting stuff from them because they offer all sorts of cool deals and bundles and stuff. Like I've gotten 2 different mystery grab bags from them, which were $100, but all the books in each grab bag were like probably worth at least $100 each. So it's like you get like 3 books for a third of whatever their cover price was, like overstock book. And I actually just opened another one I got in the mail today, and it was cool. There was actually books in a series that it was that one historical fiction book I told you about. Where
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. It's called the Matthew Corbet series, and the author, I think his name is Robert McCammon. And the guy, like the character's described as like an American James Bond. It's set like in like the 17th, 18th century, I think. And it's planned to be 10 books. The 10th book is forthcoming, and yeah, the box I literally just opened before we did the video was book 8 and 9, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
And it's like I just read book 7. And you don't really have to read them in order. It's not like a fantasy or a sci-fi. Each book is self-contained, but I think the ending of each book does lead into the next.
Oh, okay.
But there's enough. They bring you up to speed. So
Nice.
like when I started book 7, it kind of, I guess, told you what happened at the end of book 6, and it's like, oh, this is what he's doing, this is where he is, and then it had its own self-contained plot with a setup for the next book.
That's cool. Yeah, you showed me some of those when I visited you last. Some of those boxes you got. So that's such a cool idea, like concept. I love that.
Yeah, I now that I have that, I would. I mean, I can't really say I wish I read that. I didn't even know that greater series existed. But more horror in general. I want to read the Passage trilogy by Justin Cronin. It's supposed to be post-apocalyptic, and I think I read somewhere it's supposed to be kind of vampires, and then there's a vampire duology from Simon Clark called Vampiric and Vampiric Rights that I own both of those books and I want to read as well. And then there is also a sci-fi trilogy. It's also a genre called like weird / new weird. I guess it's because it's like a weird funky genre by China Mieville.
Okay.
And it's called the New Chromosome trilogy. And all I know is the first book takes place in like the like the city is built around or like within like the giant bones of like a huge corpse of some kind.
Cool.
I was like, oh,
that sounds awesome.
Yep. So those are just a few quick ones. I mean, I could go on and on, but like those are the main things I want to tackle. Besides what we're gonna,
Yeah.
we have a series that we're gonna talk about that we want to read.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about when we go into like what we're gonna read next year, which we've already kind of done, but that's okay. So there's a few things that I wanted to read this past year that I did not. I actually have a list of books that I was planning to get to this year, but it was big and I didn't expect to do it. But there's a handful that I really wanted to do that just didn't happen, which I can actually showcase all of them.
Oh, cool.
So this one, I did not read Geddy Lee's. This is totally, I guess, I'm unrelated to books, or I guess not. But I'm a massive Rush fan, as are you. And one thing this kind of is a placeholder. I've really been wanting to read more rock star biographies or autobiographies, just because they're fascinating. It's just really interesting. This was the big one that came out, I think, the end of last year, if I'm not mistaken, 2023. And I meant to get it. I finally have a copy, and it's like, I've had it a while. I've been wanting to read it, and I want to read the physical copy because he's got all these lovely photos and stuff in here, like tour photos and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm gonna read this year for sure, and I wouldn't mind sprinkling in like one or two other autobiographies or something. But yeah, I really really wanted to read this, and I know you read it and you loved it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I might be talking about it later.
nice,
Yeah.
nice, nice, nice. So yeah, anyway, that was a big one that I wanted to read. The other one, and I owe you an apology for this one, Matt, is this book that I've been borrowing from you for like a year. I meant to read this around spooky season, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read this, and then I'll read this, and this took so long that it was like well into November because my physical book reading slowed down. For the audience, I usually am reading a physical book and listening to an audiobook. So I've usually got about 2 books going at the same time, sometimes 3 because I'm insane. But yeah, I ended, then I saw this and I knew Stormlight was coming and I had some other stuff I wanted to read and I was like, I'll get to it next year. So I will.
Oh, you're totally fine.
I will read this. I will give this back to you, but I want to read this really badly. So yeah, different reasons.
And if you want to save the spooky stuff for spooky season, Shawshank is in that collection, and yeah, that's horrific for a different reason, but there's nothing like supernatural or paranormal about Shawshank.
I'm probably just gonna read it when I can at this point. I'm not gonna worry about spooky season. I wouldn't mind being able to give that back to you next time I see you in person, so we'll see.
Okay.
And then these are the 2 big ones that I'll talk about that I really want to do this year. One, and I had talked about both of these in the last video we did. One is the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. I've never read any of the Star Wars. This is Legends now. I mean, who cares about the stupid canon at this point? But apparently this stuff is this trilogy is really awesome. I have all 3 of these books. They look great. I'd like to read them physically. If I end up just audiobooking them, that's fine. So we'll see. But yeah, I really want to do the Thrawn trilogy. The big kahuna, and I've already started this, is I started The Hobbit. Which is awesome, by the way. I haven't read this since I was a kid. And this is my big shame. I've never read The Lord of the Rings. I've seen all the movies. I've listened to the friggin' BBC production from the 80s. I've never read Tolkien. Okay, that's not true. I read this when I was a kid, The Hobbit. But I've never read properly the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is a really really big fuck up on my part, and I'm hoping to I'm not hoping, I'm starting to fix it. Like, I'm reading The Hobbit now, and then I'm gonna go right into Lord of the Rings. So hopefully I'll have this done by the end of the month. It is kind of a palate cleanser month, so I feel like The Hobbit's pretty simple to read. It's not as big as this, so probably once we get into like late January or early February, I'll be really chonking into this, which I'm really excited about. We just recently watched the movies, and I told you off camera we're going to see a string quartet in like a week play Lord of the Rings music. So it's time, you know. I'm glad to finally be reading like the this series, and I may even throw the Silmarillion in here.
Ooh.
We'll see how brave I get. I don't know.
Yeah, I was literally gonna use that exact word. You're a brave boy.
So there you go. These are my lovely retro Lord of the Rings books that I love doing.
That's really cool. You even got like a slipcase for them all too. Like, I
spent for these less than $10
at
a book sale in Ithaca. Amazing. Okay, so that's the stuff that we had wished that we had read. Was there a theme to your reading this year at all?
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to yours. I kind of think we might have a somewhat similar, but yeah, no, there's like 3 main genres for me: horror, dystopian, and fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, like, a lot of Terry Brooks stuff actually kind of fits all 3 of those things, actually, honestly.
Yeah.
Even his more fantasy stuff. But I read a sci-fi from him at the very beginning of last year, and that hit on dystopian. It wasn't really a horror or fantasy, but like that was like it was good. I might be talking about that later too.
Was that in the Shannara universe?
No, actually, that was hard sci-fi. But like I said, there are elements of like light sci-fi in Shannara, but no, this was just straight up like hard sci-fi.
You might have
It
told me
was
about this book. I might have to read it because I'd love to see what he could do with science fiction. Because
yeah, I think you would really like it. I don't worry, I will go on about it at great
okay.
lengths very
Sounds perfect. Sounds perfect.
soon.
Um, I took a bit of a different approach to this one. There were kind of two things that I noticed that were a big theme in my reading. One, lots of creatures and monsters. Now that's not just horror. I've read quite a bit of horror, but like even like science fiction-y stuff that I've read, fantasy, like I just noticed there's like all these like cool creatures and stuff. So I had to mention that, and I always love that. Like even Final Architecture, even though that was probably the thing that I liked the least, it had like such cool aliens in it, you know? There were cool creatures in the Shannara trilogy that I read, and obviously Stormlight has all those creatures, but also like all the horror books, there's some cool monsters, and you know, it just like I love stuff like that. So there was tons of that, and like most of the books I read. And then the other theme was the simulation.
Oh, no.
There was quite a few books, like just offhand I'm thinking of, where it had to do with the simulation or something, and I literally, which that'll go into the next thing we talk about, but literally read a book about the simulation. But yeah. So the simulation was another funny theme. Yeah. And I guess for me I'll just go right into the next one was just to talk about a wild card book. So my wild card book was I read a book called Simulation Hypothesis by Rizwan Virk, is that his name? I don't know. I've seen him. He was like he's been around. He goes on podcast stuff. He was on Joe Rogan and stuff, and he wrote this book. He tried to. I read this earlier on in the year, last year, and he ties in everything into this simulation hypothesis that he has. And I believe the book I read is called Simulation Theory, We Are Living in a Video Game or something. And his big metaphor is video games. And he talks about how just different phenomena, and also he weaves like physics into it and other sciences and religion. And he weaves it together into this simulation theory, and he kind of is trying to explain how it kind of the theory kind of ties everything together. You know, I'm not saying I'm like a convert or a believer, but it was a very, very interesting read, and I really enjoyed it. So that's my kind of wild card book. Cause,
really ties the universe together, man.
Yeah, because that rug really ties the universe together.
Tie the room together, man.
Well, going like there's nonfiction books, or sorry, there was lots of fiction books that I read about the simulation, and then I got interested in it, and I was starting to read about it, and I was like, let's read a book about the simulation theory. That'd be kind of cool. And I just found this one on Audible, and I listened to it. It was very interesting. So I think you'd like it if you ever get a chance.
Nice.
So what's your wild card?
A coworker lent me this book. It was called The 12-Day Chase for Lincoln's Killer by James L. Swanson. And it's basically, from what I understand, one of, if not like the best recreation of the 12 days after John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln.
Cool.
And there was some hilarity in this book. Like there was some bits that played out like an Abbott and Costello bit, or like Three Stooges. Like it's honestly baffling that they didn't catch him sooner. He did some pretty stupid things.
Is the book historical fiction, or is it purely historical?
I want to say it's like 90% historical. He like definitely fills in some things that probably happened. Like obviously there's conversations that Booth has with people that we have no idea if those were 100% accurate. But as far as like where he was and when he was, at these places on the run, that's almost 100% accurate. Because the guy who wrote it's like an actual Lincoln historian. He actually gives tours at like Gettysburg and stuff too. So the guy is like literally a professional Lincoln scholar. So
I'd like to read more historical and even historical fiction. I read a book that I'll be talking about pretty soon. That was historical fiction that was excellent, and then it made me interested in the historical event. So I love to read more stuff like that, which is cool because like I feel like I'm just slowly, my nucleus is fantasy, and now it's science fiction, and it's going out to other genres, which is really cool.
You're becoming a more complex organism. You're not you're not a single-celled organism.
I'm not single-celled anymore. I'm not a single-celled reader anymore. At least I'm not an incel reader. Anyway, okay, Matt, we can do it. Let's do our honorable mentions. So I say instead of switching off, one of us will go and they do all their honorable mentions, and then this is how it's gonna go, folks. I'll let Matt go first. Matt will say all of his honorable mentions. I'll say mine, and then when we get to the top 10, we'll switch off like his 10, my 10, blah blah blah, down to 1, and then we have a few questions at the end, looking ahead, and then that's the video. So go ahead, Matt. What were your honorable mentions for this year?
Okay, I have 2 written down, but I can think of more. Small Magic, which was a short story collection by Terry Brooks, was very cool. There is a bunch of short stories from all over the Shannara timeline. There's actually like one that takes place literally right before the beginning of Sword of Shannara. This isn't really spoiling anything because it's the very beginning of the book, but basically, since you read it, it's like it's Al-Anon figuring out like where Shay is, kind of. Yeah.
Is it this one?
No, that takes place after Wish Song.
Yeah, this is after Wish Song. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. The short story, the specific short story I'm referring to takes place right before Sword. Then there's a short story that takes place after the follow-up series to that trilogy. And then there's some series that take place, then there's some stories that take place even earlier than the one before Sword. And then there's some stuff from Word and Void in there too, which is really cool. And there's even some Landover stuff too, which is another series I've been meaning to read by Terry. It's kind of like it kind of reminds me of like Douglas Adams or like Terry Pratchett. Like it seems very whimsical and silly.
Nice.
It's almost like an old like isekai anime where, like, from what I understand, the premise is this guy is basically told about like a magic kingdom that he can buy, and he goes to this other world and he basically becomes a king. And that's it's funny that this genre has existed for years, but like anime has made it like super popular like in the last few years.
Yeah.
But so that was cool. That's called Small Magic, and then Illuminations by Alan Moore, which I said was a very hit or miss short story collection. But there was also some horror books that I really liked. I read one called Behind, which takes place with the main character who, what's the word? Basically, without spoiling too much, like, he kind of sees like a world beneath ours, like a reality behind ours, if you will. The book's called Behind. It gets really, really funky and trippy and heady at the end, which was cool. And it kind of ends with that classic horror hook where it's like, oh, are they in a recursion right now? Like, you know how sometimes the Nightmare on Elm Street movies end really cheeky, where it's like, are they in a dream or something? It ends with that, where it's like, oh, are they back in the real reality? Or are they now in another layer of the, behind reality?
Yeah, yeah.
And then there was another horror book that kind of read like the Blair Witch Project. It was about a group of college kids. That book's called Memorials by Richard Chismar. And the other one was by Bentley Little, Behind. And those were the first books I read by either of those two guys. And I know Memorials was pretty cool. Yeah, it reads like the Blair Witch Project. 3 college kids go and do like a college project where they visit roadside memorials, and funky stuff starts happening where like people try to like run them out of the area. And yeah, and then it gets real crazy. I kind of hope there's a sequel to that and Behind, but I don't know. They might just leave them alone as is,
Yeah, yeah.
But I enjoyed them, and they were both newer. Behind, I think, also came out last year, and Memorials did too. So if we're talking about contemporary books, besides like Wind and Truth, I did read some books that actually did come out last year.
Nice,
which
that's awesome.
I don't know if I read any that came out like 2023 in 2023. So there's that.
That's awesome. it's cool you've been getting so into horror. I'm gonna have to hit you up for more horror recommendations because I actually soon want to read another horror book, so I might have to hit you up. But anyway, yeah, that's awesome. Any other honorable mentions?
Let's see. You know what? I'm actually going to pull up the full list of stuff I read because yeah, I wasn't sure how in depth we were going to get with that. But
Sure,
okay,
I did like 5 or 6 of them, I think, something like that. I usually do like 6. How many did I do? 1, 2, 3. Oh, I did 7.
Okay. Flash Forward by Robert Sawyer. That was awesome.
Fun. We read that
It didn't
together.
quite crack my top tier for stuff I read this year, but it was pretty darn good. I also really liked the first book in the War Arts saga by Wesley Chu. That was really cool. It's kind of like fantasy martial arts. I think the genre is referred to as wushu, like Wuxu, like kind of like fantasy martial arts type stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Another honorable mention, Eruption. That was fun.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah. Michael Crichton and James Patterson. Yep.
Yep.
We read that together.
So Cold the River, which was by Michael Korita.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of like a horror suspense where a videographer is asked by somebody to investigate their family because a family member passes away and there's a will that's questionable.
Okay.
And there does actually end up being some supernatural stuff in that, which is cool because Rob and I read one called Those Who Wish Me Dead or something. Yeah. And there didn't really end up being a supernatural bent to that for the most part. So I was telling Rob if he wants to read a Michael Korita with like something like that, you know, he would definitely want to read So Cold the River.
Yep.
Let's see. What else do we have here? Yeah, I think that's it because the rest of what I have is either parts of series. Oh, I guess there's one more. I read a science fiction book by an author called Mary Rosenblum. She didn't write a ton of books. She actually passed away a few years ago in a plane accident, which is really, really unfortunate. Like she was,
sad, yeah.
I think she was flying a biplane or something, and no, it was really cool, and it was like a plausible take on like the near future. Basically, like there's like 3 big like satellite cities in orbit, and like humanity starting to slowly evolve, and there's a lot of like geopolitics and stuff. I thought it was pretty good.
Cool. I think I remember you talking about that book actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it was neat. Like, the humans start evolving to like deal with 0G, and we almost start evolving more like monkeys again, like longer fingers and stuff, and like thinner bones. It's
Nice.
interesting.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense if you were in 0G long enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, are you done with your honorable mention? Should
Yeah.
Okay.
You're totally.
I? Okay, so some honorable mentions. So one for me, I'll just I'm gonna go like up the list, I guess, to the ones that like were so close to making it, because there was a few that were. It's hard to do 10. I read a lot of really good books this year, so these were all really, really good in my opinion. The first couple maybe wouldn't have made top 10, but they're also right there. So Fall of Moondust by Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, I like that.
This was, is this 2001 or City in the Stars or Childhood's End? No, I still couldn't put this down. I thought it was great. I thought it wasn't what I was expecting, but I still really loved it. The premise is just basically, for those who don't know, it's the future. We've basically colonized the moon, and there's this shuttle that goes across like this kind of barren part of, well, the whole moon's barren, but you know what I mean. It's like this kind of the sandy part of the moon. There's an accident, and this barge full of people gets buried, like I think it's like quite a few feet underneath the sand with like no trace, and it's basically a story of how those people are rescued. That's basically it. So it's a really interesting story, kind of cool, and it was just fun. It was fun to read. I really liked it. Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah. It reads like a search and rescue book, basically. Like
Exactly.
It could easily be a movie. It easily could be a movie.
Easily could. Yeah, how it hasn't been a movie is beyond me. Another one I don't. By the way, if people already know this, but I'll have graphics up for books we can't showcase. The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. Talking about him again. Really loved that. I know he's done like the Skyward series. I know he's done like other little science fiction things, and even Stormlight at this point, without spoiling anything. Stormlight's always had a sci-fi bent to it, you know. But it was cool to see him do pretty much just like a full-on sci-fi futuristic story, which was really cool. I loved it. I thought Sunlit Man was great. I had a blast. And I don't know how spoilery it is, but the main character is a character from Stormlight, so that was like a cool bonus to see this character in a completely different world, in a completely different setting. And it just kind of reinforces like the grandeur of the whole Cosmere, which is his, big scale universe that he's been building for years now. So that was really fun. I really liked it. That was another one we read together. I already talked about it. The October Country by Ray Bradbury. The master of short stories. Love his prose. Love the moods of his stories and like kind of the atmosphere. This is just great, kind of bleak, October-y, fall, kind of whimsically, it's Ray Bradbury. I don't need to explain. He's awesome. Pet Sematary by Stephen King. That was the only King that I read this year. I read that at the very beginning of I keep saying this year, of 2024. I read that at the very beginning of 2024, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was a great horror book. Creepy. It for so long it was in my top 10, and then it just kept getting bumped down as we got closer to the end of the year. So these next few, starting with Pet Sematary, were all in the top 10 at one point and are interchangeable, like could easily be in the top 10. But Pet Sematary, it is a classic for a reason. It was properly creepy. It was dark. It was just like the best of classic Stephen King. So yeah, I highly recommend that book. This one surprised me. I've heard a lot of criticism of this book, even though it's also beloved. But Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, I loved it. I thought it was great. There's a faction of people that don't like it at all. I thought it was fun. It was great.
Oh yeah, no, I really like it too. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that there's like a lot of nostalgia bait. Blah,
of course
blah,
it
blah,
is.
blah,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of part of the plot though, because it's like without spoiling too much, everyone, real quick, explain like on 5. Ready Player One takes place in the future. Hey, also dystopian. Like I mentioned, the theme for myself. But yeah, anyway, there's this online interface called the Oasis, and the guy who created it created a bunch of Easter eggs, and they're actual eggs you need to find, to basically inherit the Oasis and become the owner of it, and take over his company, because I guess he's eccentric, you know what I mean? And part of the part of that is he has a lot of nostalgia for stuff in the 80s and like 90s and 70s, so there's a lot of like nostalgia and like pop culture references to like anime, movies, games, music.
Oh, everything. Yeah. I don't I knew that going into it. That was a big criticism that people had, but I felt the story. All right. So the criticisms I can agree with. His prose isn't great. He's not.
No,
like
it is not.
He's not like a. He's not a flashy writer. He's probably not even a very good writer. But the story is solid. The story was engaging. The characters were interesting.
Yes.
I did enjoy the pop culture references, but it would have been a good story without them.
Yeah,
if he had filled in the pop culture references with just other stuff that he made up, that would have been fine too. Like it was a cool story, and I not gonna lie, I did enjoy the pop culture references. The Rush part. That was I was like, all right, this is awesome. That was the only time where I was like with the pop culture references where I was like, okay, this I love, But it was a great story. I had a blast reading that book. So I don't know, say what you will about him as a writer, make fun of the pop culture thing, but I thought it was a fun story. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the second one is, because I think it's out. Ready Player 2.
It is. Yeah, I've heard even less good things about that, but I'm willing to try it maybe. So we'll see. I don't know.
Maybe a library, you know?
These last, technically 3, but I'm going to talk about it
Mhm.
in 2, and you'll see why. But these last ones were really hard not to put in the top 10 because I loved these books, but the top 10 I feel is so solid that it's like I kind of get like these could be interchangeable, you know. So one is Weave World by Clive Barker. This
Yeah.
this was one of the weirdest books I've ever read. I'm a big Clive Barker fan. He wrote the Hellbound Heart, which is the story that Hellraiser is based off of, and he's done some other films and stuff. I believe he directed Hellraiser and other movies. He did a book called Cabal, which I really liked. This was his like attempt at dark fantasy, and it's really good. It was really, really good. Those creatures I was talking about, like, imagine a fantasy, but like the creatures are like the Hellraiser creatures, really dark and twisted and gross and all that kind of thing. And it's just okay to sum up Weave World without having to spoil too much. It takes place in the in the real world. It takes place primarily in Liverpool. There's this character that lives there, and he stumbles upon a fantasy world that's inside of a carpet. And there's this sleazy salesman and this enchantress, we'll call her, who are trying to find this carpet, and they end up, long story short, getting in this like they chase down this character, and a bunch of really insane weird shit happens. And then there's this like crazy fucking like skeletal demon like god creature thing that comes into play, and it's batshit bananas, and it's awesome. I loved it.
Okay, so it's called Weave World because it's like in like the fabric.
It's in the carpet. Yeah, exactly. Got it. So it's weird. But it's quintessential Clive Barker. I love his prose. I love his storytelling. If I were to give a single criticism of the book, it's maybe that the main character wasn't like super interesting, but he's fine. You know, he was good enough. The villains were actually more interesting. You know.
So okay, so he sounds like Shadow from American Gods. Is he more of like a blank slate for the reader to insert themselves? Then?
Yeah. I would say he's a little bit more of that. Like he has a personality and he has a story and stuff, but he's not amazing, but it's okay because the story's so fucking weird.
Yeah,
I just appreciate it for what it is, you know. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Weave World was fabulous. I'm kind of regretting not putting it in my top 10, but whatever. And then this one, so this another big theme for me this year was, I've really fallen in love with Dan Simmons as a writer. I think he's fabulous. Nice. He has some of the very best prose. I think like he's so good. Like there is this like higher echelon of writers where you go, okay, like they're writing alone. You go, okay, they are on another level. Like they are, and Dan Simmons is that way. So. There's 2 books that I read by Dan Simmons. One was called Children of the Night, which is a vampire story, which I read around spooky season. That was really awesome. More realistic take on vampires. They try to explain sort of like why they suck blood, that kind of thing, and it's based more on like the historical Vlad Dracula Tepish.
So, very cool.
There's not a ton of the actual like, you know, classic Stoker vampire lore in there, but there's just enough to make it kind of creepy. But that was a really, really great book. And then The Terror by Dan Simmons I read, which Rachel and I right now are watching the series of that they made. They made a TV series. It's 1 season. Well, actually, it's technically 2, but the book part is only 1, so I'm only reading that. And that is phenomenal, that book. And I'm kind of regretting not putting it in my top 10. But it's historical fiction. It's based off of this. It's these 2 ships that left England to find the Northwest the Northwest Passage. So through Canada, they're basically trying to sail through Canada to the Arctic to get to the other side to like China and India. So it's like kind of a shortcut, I guess. So, you know, they don't have to go all the way around Africa, right? They just go that way. And so these two ships get stuck in the ice, and it's two crews of like 100 so people, and their boats are literally frozen in the ice in the Arctic for like years, and it's just them trying. It basically de-evolves, like bad shit keeps happening to them. Like they start getting
God,
they start getting
eating each other.
yeah, they start getting scurvy. Then like I don't want to spoil it too much, but like just some of the stuff that happens. They start getting scurvy. The cans of food they brought with them end up like the canning process wasn't done well, so they're starting to get lead poisoning. Like
Oh my God.
the summer thaw never happens, and so they're just stuck in the ice. And then in the meantime, this creature starts hunting them.
Nice.
So there's a bit of the supernatural in it. So it's a really, really good book, and I'm really enjoying the series as well. And Dan Simmons is a master. And the historical elements of it are correct, like the dates, the characters, and stuff. But he obviously takes a lot of liberties. So if I were to recommend you a book, Matt, because I know you appreciate Dan Simmons as well, that's not like the Hyperion Cantos or anything, and you want something different, that is an amazing book, The Terror. I really loved it. Shout out to my buddy Peter. He's the one who told me about it. It's a great book. So those are our honorable those are our damn you. Those are our honorable mentions. I might cut that out. Those are our honorable. Can you please say it?
Honor is dead, but Rob will see what he can do.
Oh, those are our honorable mentions. Wow. Okay, good job. Oh, okay. All right, so this is the part where we're gonna get to our top 10 books. We'll count down from 10 to 1, and then we'll switch off. So I just had my long diatribe there. Go ahead. What's your number 10, Matt?
Number 10 is Street Freaks. That's the sci-fi book by Terry Brooks.
Nice. Okay. Yep. I remember you talking about
basically, a great way to describe this book is it's like Fast and Furious meets Blade Runner.
Love
it's exactly like that. It takes place in a dystopian sci-fi city. It's America, but it's no longer America. I forget what the name of the country or continent is now. And I believe it takes place on the West Coast, as Terry Brooks is a West Coast guy. And basically, it's about this guy who's the son of a big pharmaceutical guy who gets assassinated. But right before he gets assassinated, he tells his son about what he's supposed to do in case of emergency. He's like, oh, you need to go in the red zone, which is like this area that's kind of off limits in the city. Because it's dangerous and the cops don't really go there. He's like, oh, you got to go there, and you got to go to this auto body shop where they can protect you. And the auto body shop is run by a bunch of not really mutants, but people who've like cybernetically enhanced themselves.
Cool.
And the derogatory term people call them is freaks. And they're in street racing, like the Fast and Furious movies used to be about. So it's kind of like that. That's a big part of the book. The racing, it's like intrigue and mystery. The main character's trying to figure out what his dad was working on, like why the pharmaceutical companies and like government like want to get to him, and like I forget if he has some information that's implanted in him or like it's a physical object, but basically he's being hunted and he doesn't know why. And he's trying to figure out the why of it. And some of the characters are more robotic than others, and it ended up being really cool. It was really different. Like, I've read most of the books he's written at this point. Like I said, I haven't read the Landover books, and he wrote another trilogy of books recently, also unrelated to Shannara, that I haven't read. But no, I liked it quite a bit, and he left it so that there could be more. But if there's not, it's still a perfectly fine ending.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I might have to check that book out.
I would highly recommend it. I could totally see that being a movie too. Like they could totally make that story into a movie without having to like omit too much or really change anything. I think
he seems like one of those authors, like where he's written other stuff, but he's so well known for Shannara that like I don't know how familiar people are with his other things. I'll be talking about another book by an author, same type of thing.
Situation.
Actually, yeah, same situation where it's like they're known for a much like bigger series, but they did do other things that people just don't know as well because the bigger series overshadows everything else, right? And God, he's written so many of those goddamn Shannara books. You know?
Yeah, no, and yeah, there's still more coming. We'll get into that later when
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about our most anticipated books for next year. Are we gonna do that after our top 10?
Yeah. I kind of like to end it with, like, looking ahead, right? So
Makes sense.
cool.
Yeah.
So that's your number 10. So my number 10 is, they're on this side. My number 10 is Eruption by
Ooh.
Michael Crichton and James Patterson. We read this together. This was, this one, I would say, it started out a little slow for a Crichton book, and by that I mean like it was still a fast-paced read, but for Crichton, it was a little slower. But then, like, the last, I'd say, half of this book, it just, like, it flew. It was just fabulous at the ending, and so I was really looking forward to this book. The very short, like, the short and narrow of it is that Michael Crichton had been working on this story for a long time, from what I understand, and never finished it. His widow found it on his computer and sat on it for quite a while. She said, I saw an interview with her, and she said that she was just waiting sort of for the right author to come around. And then James Patterson's super famous. He's probably like the most famous writer right now. Like, he probably sells more books than any other writer right now. And he ended up picking it up and finishing it. And I've never read a James Patterson book, which I think I'm going to do now because I thought he did a good job with this. But anyway, he finished it, and it's a really good. This was a page turner. This was great. It's classic Crichton. It's basically takes place in Hawaii. There's this imminent eruption of this massive volcano that's going to happen, and the thing blows, and it's insane. And there's some really dumb people in this that kind of get what they deserve in a way, but it's also like, I don't know. Anyway, but they also put, like, I mean like both Patterson and Crichton, because I don't know where Crichton ends and Patterson begins or whatever, but they killed some characters in this, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, so many characters die in this,
Yeah, it might be one of the highest body count Crichton novels I've read, honestly.
Yeah, anyway, it was this. I thought this was great. I'm always down for, like, a cool, like, volcano eruption story. I don't know. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. This was a great read along. What's your number 9, Matt?
That would be My Effin' Life.
Geddy Lee. I'll put it up for you.
Yep. No, it was a very good read. And Rush is probably in my top 3 favorite bands. They're probably
Same. They're number 2 for me.
2 or 3.
Nice. Yeah.
And yeah, no. Honestly, it was such a fascinating read. Like, both from, like, the technical, like, rock and roll aspect. I mean, like, heritage-wise, like, my dad's side of the family is Jewish, so reading about, like, Getty's struggles with that growing up. His grandparents were
no, his parents were in the Holocaust, right?
Yeah, his parents and grandparents were in the Holocaust, and a lot of his relatives, and honestly, it shined a light, which was kind of interesting. And I mean, the older I get, the more I realize this about the world too. America and a lot of the world likes to paint us as, like, uniquely racist and prejudiced, but reading that book, I was like, okay, so it's not just Americans who are morons. Like, Getty faced a lot of anti-Semitism from a lot of Canadians, honestly, growing up.
Yep.
Anti-Semitism isn't a unique thing to, like, Germany or America. It happens everywhere.
Everywhere, yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So that was sad to see. But I mean, I also learned a lot too. Like, I didn't realize how much of a loose cannon Alex Lifeson was. And then, of course, reading about all the Neil stuff was heartbreaking, but also fascinating. Like, just like Neil's earlier life, and the story with him trying out is amazing. I don't want to spoil it for you, but, like, the skinny of it is he comes to try out. Like, Getty brings him in, and, like, Alex at first is just like, oh, who is this guy? I bet he's gonna suck. And then, like, he was only like one of the first few people to audition that day, and like as soon as he's done Alex, it's just like you could still audition everybody, but like this is the guy. Like after he's like shit talking him, it's so good.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, and I guess Neil Peart was kind of like dorky in a way. Like he was a big reader, kind of nerdy. So they were
Yes.
like, "Oh, is he cool enough to be in the band?" And it's like, yeah. Now, like, look what happened. Was there? It's okay if it's slightly spoilery, but was
Mhm.
there one thing from the book that really surprised you? I'm sure there was quite a few things, but was there anything that stands out that like really surprised you about the band,
The band as a whole,
or even just Getty, I guess.
yeah, I didn't realize how much he wasn't home for his kids at first. Like especially his first kid. Like he definitely tried. No, and he was very self aware of this, by the way. Even though he said it took him a little while
Yeah,
to kind of, but he said he made more of an effort when I forget if his daughter or son was born first, but whenever the second kid was born, he made more of an effort to be home because I guess him and his wife kind of had like a strained relationship for a little while before he found more of a work life balance, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure I know that's definitely not unique to just him. That's like not even to a rock and roller, but to like any kind of touring musician.
Well, especially
Or-
back then in
yeah.
the 70s and 80s, they would tour relentlessly. And they
Oh
had
yeah.
to because that was how they got their records. You know, that's how
Yep.
they were able to
There's a
sell
lot.
records and stay relevant. Is just and like Rush wasn't a band where they had a big hit and got famous. They had to build it from the ground up. So the only
Yep.
way he was going to do that was to tour
Everyone was
constantly. And they used to like I just remember even seeing, and this isn't unique to Rush. This is just what rock bands did back then. It was like they would tour like 365 days a year. They'd tour like 300 of those days, and they'd write the entire record on the road. You know,
Oh yeah.
and it's like it must have been really difficult to try to balance work and or balance that workload with life, especially when you have like a major record deal and all that. So it's like that must have been really difficult to do, but he obviously persevered, which is cool. And I think he's still with his wife, right? Like they've been married for long
Yeah.
time. So yeah, that's cool. I'm really really want to read this. Again, any other Rush nerds? I love Geddy Lee. I love Rush, and this just sounds like it's real fun. I'm sure there's a
Yeah,
lot of
and
humor in it because they were a really hilarious band.
There's the Ace Frehley story that like Dan loves talking
The
about.
bag.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I guess they did not get along with Gene Simmons that well at all. But to be fair, he kind of sounds like a prick. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm sure Ace would probably agree with us.
Yeah, I'm sure Ace Frehley would. Yeah, just recently, just some of the stuff he said about him and Paul Stanley. I love Kiss Drama,
Yeah.
but that's a whole totally different story. Okay, my number 9 is a book called Hell House by Richard Matheson. Richard Matheson wrote I Am Legend, and he also
Yeah.
wrote some screenplays and stuff for like Roger Corman films and stuff. He's most well known for I Am Legend though, but Hell House is a story from like the early 70s he wrote, and it's just a good proper haunted house story, and it's fantastic. Had me on the edge of my seat. It was creepy, it was scary, the characters were really interesting. There's sort of like there's 4 characters that go into this haunted house. One of them is an adult who went there as like a teenager, and he was the only one who survived. And he
Oh.
goes in with this older guy and his wife. The older guy's like kind of like a science-minded guy, and then he's with this they're with this other lady who's more like spiritual, and they're
Mhm.
very much like the sort of philosophical opposites. They butt heads because obviously like the scientific guy is like the pragmatist, that kind of thing, where and like the science, like he goes for like the science-based approach to it, and he's like, oh, it's not ghosts, it's this phenomenon, and he's trying to prove this phenomenon and all this stuff. And then the woman is like, she's one
Yeah.
of those, like, no shade to these kind of people, but those like, kind
He's
of
like the medium
hoity-toity,
for
like
both-
I burn incense and read horoscopes kind of people, so, and she's trying to like get in touch with the spirits of the house, so and obviously the house is actually haunted, so it ends up being really cool. It was a really really fun horror book. I highly recommend it. And I also love I Am Legend too, so to me, Richard Matheson's 2 for 2. I'm gonna read more of his stuff because he's fabulous. Actually, more than that, because I've loved the movies that he's written screenplays for. Like he did, I think he did a few Vincent Price movies. He did
Oh,
what's the big one? I think he wrote The Pit and the Pendulum.
no way! That's
I think he
really
wrote the
cool.
screenplay for that. Yeah, so he's great. Yeah, Hell House, excellent book. What's your number 8?
That would definitely be The Sunlit Man.
Nice, awesome.
Yeah, without going into spoilers, which it's very easy to do for that book. It's, as far as I understand, it's very late game Cosmere, like a few hundred years after whatever the most recent books in the timeline are currently. Seeing the mechanics of how the magic system that's applicable to this character interact with the area he's in were very fascinating. There's lots of implications and statements and things made about a certain power system that you find out that the character ends up inheriting. Something that we didn't know much about until this book, which has serious ramifications for him and the surrounding universe at large, honestly. But the story itself was fairly self-contained. I really enjoyed it. It was awesome. It was cool to see this character get a book to themselves because previously they were just one smaller side character in a bigger story. But it was their time to shine, and I don't know. It was really good. And out of those 4 secret projects, Rob and I still have one more to read. And then he's putting out another one this year.
Yeah,
Which is, it's like, how many more has he got in him?
I think I'll finally be all caught up with the Cosmere this year once we read Yumi and read whatever
5.
else is coming out. Yeah,
I think it's called Isles of the Emberdark.
Isles of the Emberdark. Yeah.
It's called.
Yeah. So I'll be almost caught up with the Cosmere until he releases all the friggin' Mistborn books and stuff. Guy doesn't stop writing. Okay, my number 8 is called Raptor Red. It's by Robert Barker. Backer? Robert Backer? Yeah, he's a famous paleontologist. So this was a book that I read. This was a book that I read over the summer. I always read one dinosaur book a year. I love dinosaurs, okay?
They're dinos.
I love dinosaurs. So this one I read because it was something that I'm gonna make everybody laugh with this one. I was in 6th grade. I was supposed to pick a book for a book report. And then you're supposed to do a project where you make a scene of the book somehow in some creative way. Well, I read about 2 pages, made the scene, then didn't read the rest of the book. And that was my book report. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll... And then I looked up, because I wanted to read a dino book, and I was like, I'm going to look up the best dinosaur books. And I'd forgotten about this book, and I was like, oh, okay, I remember this book. I never read it. I'm going to read it. So I read it. I listened to it, obviously, on audiobook. And it was fabulous. It was fantastic. So Robert Backer is a famous paleontologist. He consulted on Jurassic Park.
Ooh.
And I think actually Lost World, the paleontologist in that, is based off of him. He's the guy with
very
long hair and a beard, and he's a very famous. Him and Jack Horner, I think, are probably the 2 most famous paleontologists. But anyway, so it's a fictional book, but it is based off of like what was then in the 90s current science. So he wrote the book. There's like a foreword and an end note and all that stuff. He wrote the book because when they were filming Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg wanted scary raptors, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the raptors that he wanted didn't technically exist because they weren't as big as the ones in the film. The closest thing was a Deinonychus, which was not as big as the ones in the film. But during that time, their team, I believe Robert Backer's team, discovered that raptor, that size raptor called the Utah raptor, and it was discovered in Utah. And so Backer wanted to write a book about Utah raptor, so he did, and it takes place from the viewpoint of the raptor, and
Whoa.
basically what a Utah Raptor's life would be. And so you basically follow this raptor through the eyes of the raptor, but you also learn like so much about them, which is really cool. The different dinosaurs. He would like explain like how big they are, their habitat. Like he literally fleshed out this world, this actual world that, with kind of a narrative, which was really impressive. Like the narrative is basically like the raptor is looking like has a mate, loses the mate, tries to find a new mate, tries to have babies, and then there's the trials and tribulations in between. And it's actually like believe it or not, gets kind of emotional at times. Like it's actually a really well written story, even though it's all like paleontological fact. Like it's like 80% that, So it was a great book. It's one of the best dinosaur books I've ever written, and if you ever want a good dino tale, go for it. It was fun. So yeah, that satisfied like 5-year-old Rob. 5-year-old Rob was very entertained during that book. So yeah, Raptor Red by Robert Backer. Okay, what's your number? What do we have? 6? Number
7.
7. Sorry, go ahead.
That'd be Quantum Night by Robert Sawyer.
I was wondering when you were going to talk about this book. I was almost wondering if it was going to be number 1, because you surprised me with Calculating God the one year. So
not quite. This did not quite reach those heights, but it's probably my second favorite book I've read from him, though. I've read a few. I've read like 4.
He's another guy that loves dinosaurs, Robert Sawyer. But anyway, go ahead. Quantum Night.
Quantum Night was interesting. It takes place. There's a psychologist, I want to say. Yeah, that's what his main area of focus is. It's a psychologist and a bunch of physicists. They come up with this theory that all people in the world exist in 3 different mental states. They call them Q1, Q2, and Q3. That's the shorthand. But like the first is basically people will only respond to stimuli and they don't really think for themselves. That's like an overwhelming majority of the population. And then Q2s are like sociopaths.
Like go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Q2 are sociopaths. They're typically people in like leadership positions, or they're typically like morally bankrupt.
Yeah, it's like politicians and stuff.
Yeah, no, seriously, they use that as an example, which is crazy. Like actual real life politicians, which is hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Like the American president and Putin. It's a fictitious American president, but yeah, Putin's just name dropped by name. And they're like the 2 biggest examples, which is great.
Amazing.
And then there's Q3s, which is the smallest amount of the population, which are the people that actually think and engage in the world around them, and they actually have empathy. And that's the smallest, part of the population. And anyway, throughout the story, they find a way to artificially change a person's state from one to the other. So you have characters that were nice becoming sociopaths. You have characters that
that's fun.
are thinking, becoming kind of like zombies. Like they call it a philosopher zombie, so they call it a PZ because Z, Canadian.
Yeah.
But so there's like PZs, psychopaths, sociopaths, and then Q3s, which they call quicks. And yeah, basically the crux of the story is shenanigans ensue. And they need to find a way to make some powerful people in the world like actually empathetic and not psychopaths.
Nice. That sounds like a fun story.
It was. I'm not sure how sound the science is. Like at the time, like you said with the raptor thing, like this was all, Sawyer did a lot of his research. He even gave like references at the back of the book that you could go and read. Like he didn't just pull out of his butt, Like it was well thought out and stuff.
But it was at that point up to date science, right? Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of it is theoretical, but it was still a fun, fast paced read for sure. I was hooked.
He is very underrated. Robert J. Sawyer, check him out if you haven't. Like anybody who watches this, I think he's really underrated. I'm gonna try to read that this year too, because I'd like to read another Sawyer. I like him a lot, and that sounds fun to me. So, If you ever want to read a series by him, I'm really interested in the Farseer trilogy, which is it's about there's actually he has a few of them, but like this one is about sentient T-Rexes. So this could also fulfill my dinosaur one.
It has some of the best cover art I've ever seen.
Oh, it's amazing! Yeah.
For anyone watching this, just look them up. They're beautiful.
He also has a series about cavemen. They're called like hominids, or it's called something like that. Hominids, something like Caveman Society, or I don't know. I've never read it, but there's quite a lot of Sawyer to check out. And Flash Forward was fabulous. I really liked that. That was close to getting my honorable mentions. That was good, but it wasn't quite like Calculating God. That's for sure. That was a epic book.
No, it's going to be hard to find a book to beat that because it's like the emotional angle in that really hit me like a freight train. Like
same, yeah.
Very rare for like a book to make me like actually almost cry, and that did.
And he also is another one who writes page turners. You know, his prose isn't like super. It's. I see why he's kind of compared to Crichton because it's very simple, but it's it's well paced and the plot is well written. You know, and it's well researched. So props to Sawyer. He's fabulous. Okay. We're on 7, right?
Correctamundo.
My number 7 is Those Who Wish Me Dead by
Nice.
Korita.
Like Aoryta.
Yep, Korita. Okay. I read this with you and I loved it. I really loved it. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, but it was fun to read. It was fast paced. It was just. It was a great palate cleanser book at the time because I read it in between. I think I read it between Oathbringer and Words of Radiance, something like that. So it was. I read it during spooky season. It was so good. The villains are fantastic in that book. The whole theme of survival and going through the whole the kid going through the survivor course, all that stuff, and there's some twists in it and stuff. It was a really great book. I want to check out more by him. Probably that other one that you mentioned with that, like, the more supernatural.
So Cold the River.
Yeah, So Cold the River. Thank you. I couldn't think of the title. This book had it all for me. It was just one of those, sometimes you just need a nice simple story, which this was fairly simple, but also like intriguing, and it was a good thriller, I guess is what I would call it. Like a fast-paced thriller. It was fun. And some of the coolest villains, like those two brothers, were just friggin' creepy. And we watched, when I last saw you, we watched the movie based off of this, and it was a fucking disappointment.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
It was a disaster. They threw out so many great things about the book, and they even did something so stupid. I don't mind deviations from a book. What I dislike is when the deviations are actively go against what the book is about. I dislike that. There's a couple things like that I have it take issue with. Like I'm just watching the Foundation show, which is actually pretty good. I actually really like the Foundation show, based off of Isaac Asimov's books. But there's a few things in that show that bothers me on principle, just because it goes against the book and the author, whereas I feel like that's a big no-no if you're going to adapt a book. You need to adapt the spirit of the book. It's okay if it's a lot different, Jurassic Park is a lot different from the source material, but I feel like it encapsulates the spirit of the book, Something like Contact, remember we watched Contact?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Different, but it also is really, really well done, So it's like, it's okay to do that, but like if you completely miss the spirit of the book, or like I said, for me, it's actively working against it. And for me, the big one was when they went in the water. Like I was like so mad. I'm like, they literally say this in the book that's stupid to do, And they seem to have just thrown out the whole theme of survival in the movie. I don't want to rant about the movie. The book was great. I loved the book, and it was really fun to read it with you. So thank you for recommending it.
Oh yeah, like real quick sidebar too for like the author. Like I think part of the reason the book flows so well from like the suspense and thriller angle and like the clues and evidence the brothers are using to try and
Mhm.
find the kid. Korita apparently was a PI before he became an author, like a
Oh,
private
okay.
investigator. Like that's really cool.
He's a young
So I'm
guy
not
too.
surprised.
He's like our age,
Oh wow, I did not
something
realize
like that,
that.
or like not much older. Yeah, I looked him up, and he's like, yeah, I think he can't be any older than 40. I'll look it up while you say your next one. But yeah,
Sure.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, what is your
You're
number 6?
The Art of Destiny, which is War Arts Saga Book 2. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. And this was great. It literally took everything that the first book did. There's four main characters, and refreshingly, three out of the four are women. And one of them is kind of like a more elderly woman. Like, I would say that she's probably in her 60s, like, at least, if not very late 50s. She's kind of like the kung fu master of the series, uh, young protagonist who was supposed to be like the legendary hero, but in all reality is like a spoiled brat because the people who were supposed to train him did nothing but like lavish him and like give him this like ridiculous like cushy lifestyle. So he's like useless in the first book. And no, it's
Love
actually
that.
really cool. By the second book, I mean he's still not great by any stretch of the imagination, but he manages to fight and like beat an elite soldier pretty much by himself. And these like soldiers are like supposed to be like legendary, like across the realm. Like they're not like masters of like any type of kung fu style, but it was really cool to see. Like he still kind of gets his ass handed to him, but he's able to hold his own. And it's like, wow. In the first book, he wouldn't have got a hit in on this guy, you know. And no,
That's kind of
and
cool
it's really
though.
cool. Yeah, and like a big part of the story is like it's mostly it's mostly like China and like Mongol analogs. Like obviously these are like fantastical countries and it doesn't take place on our Earth, but like main country's kind of based on China with a bunch of different provinces, and then you've got like the Mongol horde that has what they call the Eternal Khan, and it's like this like there's spirits that I guess are like reborn in human bodies kind of, and a big plot point is like the Khan dies and hero is supposed to like put an end to the immortal Khan. But there's whole twist going on with like the Khan's soul and whatnot, and yeah, book two is great. It ends on kind of like a big cliffhanger. So I thought book three was supposed to come out this year. So when it didn't, I was like, oh, no, it was really good. It's the series is honestly hilarious too. It's really funny.
Cool. Nice. Okay, my number 6. Actually, also real quick, Korita, that's his name, Korita,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
42. So he's a little older than us, but still, he's pretty young.
Ah, the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah, yeah, 42.
Mm-hmm.
That was. Oh yeah. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to go on a tangent. Why not? Number 6 for me was, um, it was an unfinished. Forget it. I don't want to. I don't want to just overuse that joke. All right. Anyway, it's Tough Voyaging by George R. R. Martin, a guy you guys might have heard of before.
Yeah, he
so
wrote a
So another shout out to my buddy Peter because he told me about this. But I also I've for a long time wanted to read something else by George that isn't Song of Ice and Fire, and unsurprisingly, it's also another unfinished, an unfinished series by him.
no.
Hold on, let me pull it up. I got it. I don't have a lot of props today, guys, so there's gonna be a lot more images this year. So, Tough Voyagin' by George R. R. Martin. This was great. This is it's you could call this a short story collection because it is a series of short stories. It's just the same character in the same world, and the stories are in like a linear sort of fashion, so you know how he got from one thing to the next. This was fun. It was hilarious. It was cool to see George do science fiction because I've never read anything else by him, like I said, aside from Song of Ice and Fire. And it was fun. I hope, it'd be cool if he got back to like maybe writing a few short stories in this, but I imagine at this point he has so much pressure just from Song of Ice and Fire that he might not ever revisit this. But really cool premise. The main character's name is Haviland. Yeah, Haviland Tuff. He is a space merchant that accidentally acquires the most deadly warship in the universe, which is really funny. And he's an overweight guy who is incredibly reasonable and loves cats. You can even tell there's like a bunch of cats on there, and he's also a vegetarian. And he is like he ends up basically becoming a very benevolent dictator by accident. And it's really it's a really fun romp. Each section. How many short stories are in here? There's there are 7 short stories, and they're all starring him, and they're all just fun. This was a great book. I really enjoyed it. It was funny. It was witty. It had like the adventure aspect to it, and the character Tough is just really funny, and I love him. And I wish George had done more with it, because it was just such a unique idea and a fun story. So I can't recommend Tough Voyagin' enough. If you want to read, and I mean, it could have gone on longer, but like there isn't, if it never goes on, it ends in a somewhat satisfying way, kinda, so it's fine for what it is. It could make for a great like serial TV show, like it could make for like a Star Trek-esque show where each episode, that's how it kind of reads, like it's like each thing is an episode, so it's really fun. And I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, George wrote for a lot of TV. Like he wrote for the Twilight Zone in the 80s. I think he wrote Conan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, a lot of people did.
Yeah,
Robert Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah, he did quite a bit of TV writing as well, and obviously Game of Thrones became a massive success with TV, even though he didn't really write much of that, but you know what I mean. So he does have other good stuff, and this is definitely one of them. So I think it was just great. So if you're daunted by Song of Ice and Fire or disillusioned by it, check out Tough Voyagin'. It's fun. What's your next one? I think we're at 5 now, right?
5 would be Children of Memory, because I didn't finish it, and I don't think you finished it either until like, what was it, early this past year.
We didn't start it until 2024. That was my first physical book I read in 2024.
Yeah, no, it was really good. To me, it was my least favorite, but when I say this, I mean like Children of Time was like an 11 out of 10.
Yeah.
Children of Ruin was a 9, and this was like an 8. So this was still very good.
Yep. Yet another book that we read together.
Yep. Without any spoilers, it's like most of the book you're really not sure what's going on. It almost reads like a fairy tale. There's like a lot of ethereal qualities. Like there's a lot of recursions. It's like, oh wait, hasn't this happened before type of thing. And without spoilers, I will say you do get a huge payoff in the end, and it does explain exactly what's happening. So even if you don't have theories and you're like, what is happening? Like it will tell you, and it's not too overly complex once they explain what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if he's going to continue this whole Children of series or not, because it could get really crazy if they continue with the premise that this sets up at the end. But
it's kind of like there's a couple books like that where like Ubik comes to mind, where once it's revealed, it's like, oh yeah, that's what it had to have been. You realize it like, oh duh, I should have figured that out. But
then that freaking ending turns everything on its head again.
I know.
Like, what just happened?
Yep. Yeah, that was fun to read together. That was a really good book.
Yeah, no, Children of Memory was great. Each book introduces like a new like critter type thing, and it's like sentient corvids. Like ravens or crows, that's that type of bird family, and
the corvids are great in that. I loved it.
Yep, they get into an argument where they argue that they're not sentient, even though you would think that they would have to be sentient to even put forth the argument that they're not sentient.
Yeah. That was funny. Yeah, that had its that book had its like funny moments too, didn't it? Particularly
Yeah.
with the Corvids. Okay, my number 5 is okay. I'll just put these two up. The Sword of Shannara trilogy, and I'm including Indomitable because I read that as well.
It,
Which takes place
it
during.
serves as a short epilogue to Wish Song, so
Yeah, yeah, basically. I have I just have this as the placeholder, but yeah, of course, the Sword of Shannara trilogy, like the original trilogy. So I took this on this year because you talked a lot about Terry Brooks over the last probably couple years now, and I was like, okay, I gotta at least try out the original trilogy, and I loved it. It's like classic high fantasy, Tolkien-esque fantasy. You know, a lot of people seem to criticize the first book for being so much like Tolkien, but I loved it. I thought it was, I it might even be my favorite, to be honest, of the three. But that said, like Wish Song was really really great, and or sorry,
Elfstones.
Elfstones and Wish Song were both really really great.
Yeah, Elfstone's probably my favorite out of the trilogy, and then Wish Song, and then the
Yeah,
original.
the original I really liked because it had that whole like sort of classic part, like the Fellowship, if you will. You know, I know it was very very derivative of Lord of the Rings, but it's different enough. I felt that it was an interesting enough story, and it was him establishing the world, right? And
Yep.
I thought I loved the characters in the story. It definitely satisfied that itch. You know, there is this big thing now, and I would even credit Brandon Sanderson with this, and this is a positive, where fantasy's changing and it's becoming a lot more than it was, and it's going places it's never been, and particularly like with Stormlight and stuff like that, I would
Yep.
agree with that. But I also think, as a result of that, classic fantasy is getting badmouthed a bit. Where it's like, oh, you know, derivative of Tolkien or whatever. But it's like, to me, that stuff is still just as good because it is the foundation. Now, Tolkien is of course where it all started. Tolkien is important, but the imitators, for lack of a better term, like you know what Terry Brooks did with the first Shannara book, were also important because it like okay, so he copied Tolkien, but so did Robert Jordan, so did Terry Goodkind,
Yep.
so did like you name any like a fantasy writer from probably like this post Tolkien to like the 90s or even till now, they were influenced by Tolkien. They all ripped off Tolkien. They all ripped off Dune as well. And
Oh yeah, it's funny you mention that because
yeah,
Frank Herbert actually famously defended Terry back in the day. He's like, who cares if it's similar enough? He's like, if anything, he's honoring Tolkien and showing that
yeah.
it's like a legitimate and viable genre.
Yes, he
Like a
is,
lot
and
of people.
his world is unique enough where it's not just a carbon copy of Tolkien, in my opinion. And the story was different.
Oh no,
You
yeah,
know?
I agree with that. And one thing that's very different from Lord of the Rings, like in defense of his first novel, is there's like themes of like apocalypse and like
Yeah.
dystopian and like nuclear Armageddon. Like they talk about these things. Like it's not the past; it's actually the future.
Yes.
Like Lord of the Rings is supposed to be like Tolkien creating like folklore and mythological stuff for like ancient like England, where it's like this is like far future post-apocalyptic America where
Which
crap
predates
went
even
down.
Robert Jordan, because Robert Jordan kind of went that direction.
Yep.
And well, he did go that direction. I mean, that's basically what happens in the Wheel of Time. But
Yep.
but yeah, I thought it was I thought the original trilogy was just fun. It was classic high fantasy. It was to me it was well written. It was interesting. The characters were fun. The story, especially Wish Song and Elfstones, were very unique stories. I thought,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
but they had those cool fantasy tropes that I do like. Like I don't mind admitting that I like those some of those fantasy tropes. it's nice that other authors like Brandon Sanderson deviate from those, like actively
Yeah.
go against them, which is great. But I also think there's room for both. I think there's room for sort of classic fantasy and then like this pushing the boundaries fantasy. I don't think one invalidates the other. You know what I mean? I think it's all great. And a guy like Terry Brooks influenced Sanderson, so you have to respect the time and when it was written and why it was written and how it was written. And I thought this was a fabulous trilogy. I really, really loved it. So, yeah, the Shannara trilogy had to make my top 5 because I really enjoyed it. I had and, it filled up a good portion of my spring. Was, late winter into spring was the Shannara books. So, I really had a good time with them. So, thank you for recommending them.
Cool. No, I'm glad you really enjoyed them. That's awesome.
I'm sure I'll read more of the series eventually, but it's down the road. It's probably going to be a couple years, to be honest. But
cool.
What's your number 4?
That would be the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin. I think I said Liu before. Cixin Lin, I believe, is his last name. Chinese author. And one of the cool things about this series, especially the first book, is you get a lot of perspective, from a Chinese writer about China. A big plot point in the first book is about the Cultural Revolution, like the rise of the CCP.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big driving motivators for a decision the main character of that book makes that literally kickstarts the entire conflict of this whole trilogy, which is interesting. I don't want to spoil anything, but it involves aliens.
Nice. Okay, that makes me really want to watch it, or really want to read it.
Yep. But yeah, no, the whole thing was phenomenal. Like, it read much. Like, I would say the Children of Time trilogy and this trilogy are my favorite contemporary sci-fi I've read. I do like the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown, and he's doing a follow-up series that's going to end up being 4 books. That's more like action sci-fi, where like this and Children of Time is more kind of like your classic like high concept philosophy, like theoretical physics and that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, this was very, very good. If I did have one critique to make, like much like Clark, I would say his characters aren't the strongest, but like the concepts and the story itself and like the problem solving they do are like top notch, which is awesome.
I'm sometimes like, I like good characters, but sometimes it's not necessary. Does that make sense?
True.
It's
weird. And I will
like,
say there are some really cool characters in this. It's not like none, but
sometimes it doesn't matter. As weird as that sounds. Like,
no, yeah, exactly. As long as the plot itself is driving enough, or the concepts, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then there's sometimes where if the other stuff isn't going well and the characters aren't good, it's kind of like oosh,
Yeah.
It's like you gotta have, like, if you don't have good characters, and the plot isn't very interesting, it's like you're in trouble. Like, if the plot isn't amazing but the characters are, then it's like, okay, well, I can love these characters,
Yeah.
Anyway, and some books, I even argue, like 2001 works better because there's really not much character like development at all.
Sure.
It's more about it's all about like
the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey, bruh.
In space.
Yeah.
What is this? Some kind of space odyssey?
Yeah. Okay, my number 4. I just realized I could have brought another one of my props down, but I didn't. But that's okay. All right, my number 4 is 2 books. Finally read these. These have been on my list for a while. It's Xenocide and Children of the Mind by Orson Scott Card, which are the 3rd and 4th books in the Ender's series. The first of which being Ender's Game, the second being Speaker for the Dead. And I'm glad I read these together because apparently these were originally supposed to be one novel that he split up because it was huge. Yeah. And so this one basically picks up right after Speaker for the Dead. Did you read Speaker for the Dead?
Yeah, I really liked it. I haven't read
Me
any
too.
more since.
Me too. So this picks up right after Speaker for the Dead on that planet, and then this picks up right after Xenocide, and they're great. Like honestly, they really are great. I can't say enough about the Ender series. I really love these books. This gets more into stuff like these are such weird stories. There's like it's going on more about like sort of this conflict between, I don't know if you remember from Speaker for the Dead, there's like a conflict between this colony that Ender's on with these people and
Mhm.
the like wider government, we'll say Federation for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
then
I'm
there's a
getting a
huge
little.
plot line with the AI character Jane in this, which goes somewhere really crazy.
Oh, I
Um,
forgot all about that. Yeah.
and then there's this weird sort of religious element with one of the characters, which I feel like is a bit of Card showing a little bit of his religious side because
Mhm.
he is a Mormon like Brandon.
Yeah,
Um,
and you can see it in Brandon's writing a little bit too.
yeah,
Not as over,
you could definitely see
but
it in Brandon's writing, but it's done. I think it's all done really well. The finale of it is very interesting. This definitely wraps up Ender's arc. Uh,
oh,
Although there's like prequels and stuff too. But yeah, I think the whole so the Ender's Game series splits off from Ender's Game into two arcs. There's the Ender arc and then there's the Bean arc. Because Bean, if you remember from Ender's Game, one of the characters that's on Ender's team, he has like a whole. It's called the Shadow series, Ender's Shadow, um, and that basically takes place on Earth, from what I understand, even though I haven't read it. So you
oh,
kind of know what's going on there. Whereas after Ender's Game, Ender goes out to this other place, and
oh
that's
yeah,
where
and it's
these
been like a
come.
few hundred
Yeah,
years, right?
that's
Yeah,
where
it's
these
the
go out.
way
Yeah,
that relativistic travel works in that. Like by the time he gets to that planet, it's like a few hundred years later.
it's kind of funny. Most of my top books here, I notice, are from the beginning part of the year. Like I read a lot of these around the same time. Like I read these around when I was
Oh,
reading
wow.
right before I read Shannara, and I had just read Children of Memory, and I had read like some other books. So like it's funny. A lot of these like are on the higher echelon. Anyway, these are
Uh,
excellent. Check out the Ender series. If you don't go as far as these two, at least read Ender's Game because it's one of the greatest science fiction books ever written. So yeah, but I feel like the sequels are really solid too. Okay, I think we're almost at. I think are we at the top three? Yes, we are. What's your number
yeah.
three?
It's the Word and Void trilogy by Terry again. Terry
Nice, nice.
Brooks.
Okay.
It's really good. It's like a very it's way more contemporary, like urban fantasy. Like it's very dark. First book takes place in like a steel mill town in Illinois during the Fourth of July. The neat thing about this whole trilogy is it takes place on various holidays. The first book's the Fourth of July, or like the few days leading up to Fourth of July, and then the
Yeah,
climax. And the second book is around Halloween and it ends on Halloween. And then the last book is right around Christmas and it ends on
that's a
Christmas.
cool idea.
And yeah, no, it's neat. The setup is it's modern day. Uh, you don't really see much of like fairies or like the fairy realm, but there's like good magic and bad magic, and there's like avatars that fight for the word, which I guess is a stand-in for like God or like a good deity. And they fight the void, and that's where the demons come in. But the demons, you know, can shapeshift and take the form of humans, and honestly, some of it kind of reminded me of Salem's Lot a little bit
Cool.
because this guy, this demon comes in, and he starts corrupting the town and influencing people to act a certain way and do all this stuff. And there's kind of like plots within plots. And then the people who stand in for the word, they get these black staffs that like kind of act as like magical talismans and stuff. Uh, and it's neat. It kind of also reminds me of Arthurian legend too, because there's a lady that they just call the lady, and she's the one who picks out her champions, and she kind of has like a prophet or spokesperson, if you will, who goes and delivers the staffs to knights. And the cool thing is one of the main characters, he every night he dreams of like an apocalypse, like in a world that like him and the other knights have like failed to protect. So it's like every night he has nightmares of the future, which is crazy, and it's some heavy foreshadowing. It's cool without spoilers. Like each of the books is reciprocal. Like he's sent to the town to stop what's happening, and throughout the book, he doesn't know if he's going to have to kill one of the other main characters. And then, well, I can't really get into it without spoiling it,
Yeah.
but like but book two is very symmetrical to book one. Like it's
Cool.
like a nice yin and yang with the circumstances that character A and character B go through. And then by the third book, they like help each other, which is cool.
Nice.
But then that's also no, I'm not going to spoil that either. Like one day I'll have you read those and then read something else as well, which is
Seems
cool.
like there's quite a lot that Terry's written out, you know, like some pretty unique stuff, you know. So yeah, my number 3 is Children of Memory. So echo everything you said, you know. It was great. I really enjoyed it. The where I would differ with you is I think I liked it more than Children of Ruin.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. You were
I
saying like the concepts kind of like got a bit too much for you at the end of Ruin,
Children
right?
of Ruin, I think, yeah, it got a little too convoluted towards the end of the book. Whereas Children of Memory, it kept me going because I was like, what is going on?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it was interesting enough where I was confused and I was like, okay, I'm following it, but I don't understand what's going on. And then once it happens, you're like, oh, that's what it is, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would do on a reread. Maybe because I know what it is. It might even make it, you know, it might even make it better knowing that because you could point out stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I thought it was really great. Tchaikovsky's great. I'm sorry that Final Architecture was kind of a turd, but at least for me, Children of Memory made my top 3. So to me, it still proves that he's a great author and he's still got more in him. The Children of series is definitely one of my favorite trilogies in science fiction. I think it's super solid. All the story. What's cool about it is it's the same universe, same world, but all the stories are so different. You know, he kind of tackles a different theme with each book, which is really cool. Like he does the evolution thing in the first one. The second one kind of deals more with like an alien life form, I guess, and like he kind of goes weird places with that. And then the third one is what it is, right? But I don't want to say what it is, but you know.
Yeah.
So it's cool that he went that direction with the trilogy, which I really like. And obviously it brought back some characters from the first 2 books, which was really cool to see. Like you got to see like Portia, and I mean I know they're not the exact same characters, but you know the whole idea of like the Portids and Fabian and what's the octopus's name again? Paul, yeah, Paul and all those, and so yeah, and what's his name's granddaughter, I think, the main character from the first book.
Oh yeah.
What's his name?
Forget first and last name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah, one of the characters like grandchildren's in it. Anyway, really cool idea for a book, and I really loved it. Really rounded out the trilogy very nicely. So even if he ends it with that, I think it ends well. But I'd be down to read whatever if he decides to write a 4th, 5th, 6th Children of book, because I think he could make it I think the series could continue to be good, you know? What's your number 2?
It would probably be the Genesis of Shannara trilogy.
Nice.
I don't want to spoil anything for this one because it's really cool, but it is quite literally what it says. It's like at the apex when the old world kind of became the new world. It is like the apocalypse. Actually no, it's like post-apocalyptic, but it's like right before one of the big events that changes the area into like what we see in Sword of Shannara trilogy. And
Okay.
if you remember, you know, they talk about how like the elves were like in hiding for many years. Like this also
Yeah, I remember
detailed
that.
elves making contact with humanity again to try and salvage the rest of that part of the world because they're like, all right, we sat on the sidelines too long and let humans basically screw the earth over. We need to put on our big boy pants and actually, reintegrate into society again.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, Again, I will maybe eventually get to it. I'm just a little daunted by the size of the overall Shannara series.
No, no, you're fine. That's why I would recommend, because there's so many more books than that. Like I would recommend you do the sequel series, which is 4 books, and then these 2 sets of 3. And I
Yeah.
think even if you stopped at that, that would be great because that's my favorite out of everything. That those 4 sets, like the original trilogy, the follow up set of 4, and then these 2 trilogies. I think that's the best stuff he's written in that world, personally.
You gotta wonder how guys like him and Brandon like just have these massive worlds that they dream up. Like they just keep going with it. It's like it's impressive.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the imagination. That's awesome. My number 2 was my number 1 for a long time, and
Ooh.
anyway, it got overtaken. I got a feeling, by the way, we're gonna have the same number 1.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah. All right, yeah. You pretty much confirmed that. So we'll just say it at the same time. My number 2 was my number 1 for a while. It was 2 books, also the 3rd and 4th book, oddly enough.
Oh wow.
And I read this right before Xenocide and Children of the Mind. So I was tidying some stuff up in the beginning of the year. And it's Endymion and Rise of Endymion, which is the sequel duology or whatever to Hyperion. And I loved them. I thought they were phenomenal. I loved the Endymion books. In some ways, I almost think they're better than the Hyperion books.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I love them that much.
That.
But I in a way they can't be because you need that all that backstory from the first 2 Hyperion books, I think, for it to get fully, experience it. But yeah, and it was great. I really loved it. Endymion. It takes place, I want to say it's like 150-ish years after the events of. It's after the events of Fall of Hyperion, and it's really hard to talk about certain things without spoilers, but the main character, Endymion, is the descendant. Is he? Or am I thinking of another character? No, one of the other characters is a descendant from one of the other
main character.
One of the pilgrims. I'll just say that. A character surprisingly pops up. Actually, a couple do, but one of the main characters from Hyperion pops up, and I was like, okay, that was interesting given how much further along it is.
Yeah, it's almost 2 centuries ahead. That's interesting.
How do I describe Endymion and Rise of Endymion? I don't know. It's so there's way more that goes on. So like, you remember the cruciform?
Yeah, I have a feeling that's going to be.
That's a huge element in the Endymion books.
Yeah.
There's very much like a cat and mouse thing that happens in the first book, Endymion, from what I remember, with the main character Endymion and forces in power, I will say. And there's a really badass villain that's in it that isn't the Shrike.
I was gonna
actually
ask.
Fights the Shrike, which is insane. It's insane. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say because the Shrike's on every cover, and it looks like in the follow-up duology, he's pictured with other characters doing stuff. So I'm like, oh, is he a party member now? I'm like, that's very curious.
Yeah, the Shrike is in all of the books, and the Shrike is very important. And the Shrike like fights another crazy villain, which is really cool.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's just a great romp, man. And then and Rise of Endymion, I remember having some really vivid imagery of like being on a gas giant planet, which was really cool. Some really cool things happen with with the main character in it. It's a little because I read it almost a year ago. It's like the two books kind of like fade into each other a little bit, but and then the ending of the whole thing is just like really beautifully written. Dan Simmons is like, I'm telling you, he's on just a different level. He's amazing. So these were my number one for a long time, and I cannot recommend the entire Hyperion Cantos, all 4 books, enough. They're fabulous. So
I'm happy to hear that because I've heard people complain a lot about books 2 through 4. So if you like them that much, I'm sure that I'll enjoy them.
I could see why, I guess, because they're so different from Hyperion. But if you just go into it knowing it's going to be different from Hyperion, I don't think you. I really love them. You'll have to let me know when you read the other ones. But I thought they were. I thought they did. The whole thing was fabulous. You know?
Yeah, because I'm assuming the telling format changes, right? Like they're not just broken into 6 stories, like a
no, that's just Hyperion. Now that really works for Hyperion. It's very much like I think you mentioned. It's like Canterbury Tales, basically in space.
Yeah, it's sci-fi Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, it's sci-fi Canterbury Tales, but it goes a different direction with the other 3, and that's fine. You know, to me, it doesn't need to be like those Ender books went in a completely different direction. I think people, when they like something, they want more of the same thing. To me, the story goes in a lot of interesting directions, and I love it. I love the way he did all of it. It's beautifully written. So big props to Dan Simmons. And now, my friend, we finally get to our number one. It's the same. Come on, we all know what it is.
It's Wind and Truth.
It's Wind and Truth. Number 1. Brandon Sanderson, Wind and Truth. What can we say about this book that wouldn't spoil it for people? It's the 5th Stormlight Archive book. So I guess what I would say is if you've never read the Stormlight Archive, it's fabulous. Mm-hmm. It's probably the best modern fantasy series.
I would say it's probably like fantasy, or not even fantasy notwithstanding. Like it's probably one of the best like clinical, like strictly medical books that tackles mental health issues in a believable manner and other affliction. Like it tackles depression, dissociative identity disorder, guilt, alcoholism, like a lot of that stuff, and that's just the icing on top of the cake with like the crazy magic system and story. Like the characters feel real. Yep. That's like one of the driving factors. But I will say book 5, obviously there's going to be a book 6 through 10. I feel like most of the main characters' arcs resolve in like a phenomenal way in this for sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty satisfied where everyone ended up, even though like, you know, some of them don't end up in the best of situations by the end, but
most of them don't.
It feels complete enough though.
Yeah.
Like and even those who don't end up in the best scenario, like it made sense for their arcs, and like it's, you know, it still feels good, you know. I would say everything makes logical sense, and all the stakes that got raised in this, there's like, and it's not just Stormlight. Like one of the main complaints I've seen about this too is like, if you have the intention of reading his other books, you might want to read like most of the Mistborn books before reading this and some of his other works, because this gets very involved with like the rest of his universe. And some people complain like, oh, and this is a valid complaint. I'm not digging on these people that like, you know, it gets very Cosmere centric, which is the name of his universe. It's like, oh, shouldn't it stay on the star? But then I would argue, and this isn't spoiling too much because you learn about this in book 3 even. The main crux of the issue is that there's 3 gods on this planet, and they made a pact to keep the one god there. And, you know, no matter what they do, the god's kind of stuck there. And the rest of the gods across the whole universe don't want anything to do with it. They want to leave him to just destroy crap on that planet. And, you know, let's just say that's a major plot point in book 5.
Yeah. Sure. Yep. It's you know, it's interesting. Like, it's been quite a journey with the Stormlight Archive. He's been writing it now for like probably close to 10 years. Am I right? More than that.
Well, even more, because Way of Kings Prime came out in like 2001, 2002.
Wow,
that's when
it's a long time.
published, but That's what the copyright page says on the hardcover copy I got from the Way of Kings Kickstarter.
I forget. I kind of forget sometimes how old the series is getting now. But here's the thing. Like, it's, you know, these books I think are extremely well written in the sense. Does Brandon have the best prose? No, I don't think he does.
I would say it's definitely getting a lot better though.
It is getting better, I would say. But like, I would say that for him, his strengths are his magic systems, his storytelling, and his characters. And he's really, really good at what's called the Sanderlanche, which is setup and payoff. He always talks about it. And to me, Wind and Truth felt like the payoff for the 4 books before it. Like, it felt like the Sanderlanche of the Stormlight Archive. Like, the entire book felt like that way. Now, I've seen a lot of, like, there's been a lot of talk about this. This seems like it might be the most divisive Stormlight book, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, hands down it is, yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of weird criticisms about it. There's a lot of interesting things. The big one that I think I can understand the most and that comes up the most is that people feel that it's too bloated and that it needed to be edited down properly. Like, it wasn't edited well enough and it's too long. I could see that, but I also didn't feel like there was filler.
Same.
I really didn't.
And I wonder too. Once again, not a dig at people who like read really fast. Like, sometimes I like look at how fast other people read, like on social media. I'm like, how the hell do you retain any information?
Yeah, I don't know.
I also wonder. I'm like, did they read it just way too fast and had a hard time remembering and digesting things? Like, not making fun at their intelligence or like retention capabilities, but just honestly, because I'm like, there's people who cranked that sucker out in just a few days, if not a week. I'm like, and we took it a lot slower. You know, we kind of took the whole month, or at the very minimum, like 2.5, 3 weeks, maybe more like 3.5 to read it.
Yeah, it took me. I would say it took. Let's see, when did I start? We first started together when I saw you. We listened to the prologue together, and then you started reading it. And then when I came back from our visit down there, I started it. I probably read it over a 3-week period, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would have been probably, yeah, it would have been from like over the holidays and everything. Yeah, and I finished it January 1st. So yeah, it just felt to me like, I don't know, like, and maybe it was also because we took our time with it. I led up to it by literally rereading everything, so everything was fresh. I don't know how many people actually did that.
Some of the people I follow on Instagram definitely did that. I was like, I've reread the first 3 so many times. It wasn't even just a time thing. It's just that I can remember pretty much every single huge plot point from those 3 books that I didn't feel the need to go back and dig into them more, you know?
Well, it was only my second read of everything, so for me it was...
And that's...
It worked out really well. I felt like he didn't waste time, to be honest. I felt like there was a lot of stuff that he had to wrap up because he had... Well, I mean, and it's not totally wrapped because there's going to be a whole second arc of 5 books, but he answered a lot of questions, and I mean, he rose a lot of questions too, but like, there was a lot of things, a lot of character arcs that came to an end or came to an ending that I think were really well done. Even for minor characters, he wrapped stuff up, you know? So he had a lot to do. And there are people complaining about certain things about it, like, which don't make sense to me because they're themes that have been there from the beginning, you know?
Yeah, like... Sorry, go ahead.
Like, for example, I heard people saying that, like, they felt maybe, like, Kaladin kind of, I don't want to spoil anything, but Kaladin says that kind of dorky line, like, I'm his, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the line he says in Words of Radiance, but Kaladin's always been like a dork. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and, well, Brandon's kind of a dork, let's be real. And, like, and sometimes he doesn't write the best jokes. Like, I feel like they're kind of stupid jokes, but they work because they are, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So some people were complaining that some of the dialogue didn't sound very good and stuff, and felt like out of character or something. I didn't feel that way. I felt like
No,
it
and,
was.
yeah, it made sense. I think for the characters that did it. Uh, is the line you're talking about with Kaladin one of the lines at the very end? Was it the same line he says in Words of Radiance? Is this the one you're thinking of?
No, it was different. He says something
Okay,
about one of the other characters. I'll tell you off camera. But anyway, there
yeah,
was
because
stuff
with
like
the
that people
repeat
were
line,
complaining about, and I just felt like it was a bit nitpicky. I think it was just kind of like people have a right to not like a book. That's fine. It was a massive book. I will say that.
yes.
Like could it have stood to be a little shorter? Absolutely. But I also understand why it was as big as it was.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and you
I
can't
was
even
very
really,
satisfied with it overall.
yeah. And this time the interludes really didn't take much space up at all. Like in the
No,
physical book, dude, most of the interludes weren't longer than 3 pages, if even that.
no, they were very short. I think because Brandon is obviously taking the series in a very
Hmm.
different direction. I don't know if people are very happy about it, which is fair enough. But I feel like we all knew it was coming to something like this. At least I always felt like that.
Oh yeah, he always loves
Yeah,
changing up the dynamics of like a conflict or like character development and stuff. And
yeah,
I will admit I did not foresee like the way that this ended. Like I knew some of it. I predicted some of it was going to happen, just not the way it did, and it was kind of fun seeing some of the theories, even the ones that came true, but like had some of them had interesting pivots. You know.
yeah, yeah. He did. I felt like overall he did a really good job. This is one of my favorite. I still say Words of Radiance is probably his best,
I agree. A lot of people would. Yeah.
but it's up there for me. I still really really enjoyed Wind and Truth. I thought it was definitely my book of the year. It was the book I looked forward to the most, and I built up reading to because of having to revisit Stormlight and other books in the Cosmere, right? Um,
Hmm.
and it was just cool to see a lot of things like a lot of questions be answered and a lot of things happen. I laughed, I cried, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Journey Before Destination, folks. you know
Yep.
it was
Yeah. No,
it
it
was
was
good.
really cool.
So yeah, Wind and Truth, it's great.
Woo!
Read Stormlight Archive, it's fabulous. Probably the best modern
Really?
fantasy series. Look at Dalinar
Yeah.
there. Such a epic really is an epic cover. So
Yeah. That's Michael Whalen's last major commission
I
too.
don't know what the heck they're gonna do without Michael Whelan, so they better get somebody good.
I hope they get the guy who did the the Tress cover and all the artwork in there.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if he did the cover, but he did all the insert illustrations, and he's done some like end paper art as well for Stormlight. Howard Lyon,
Hmm.
he does some seriously good art. I kind of hope it's him. A
Yeah.
lot of people were saying,
Well, we'll
but
see, right? They have many years to figure it out since it's not coming out for a while.
I know it's kind of crazy to think that we're gonna be in our 40s probably by
Oh
Stormlight
yeah.
6.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Brandon's probably gonna be like in his 60s.
My God.
We're close to
Well,
it.
by the time it finishes, definitely, because it's like if it's going to be in about 10 years, he's 40 now. He'll be like 50. I don't think he'll quite be 60.
Yeah,
But by the
maybe.
time it finishes, he'll be 60 something for sure.
True, yeah. Well,
God, we're going to be 50. Our kids are going to be in their 20s.
I know. By the time this thing is all ended. But it's
Yep.
cool. Again, Journey Before Destination.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, speaking of very, very long things, we've done it again. It's been a very long video. It's been fun. So we're going to just wrap this up with a few looking ahead questions, right? So this is more for me, probably not for you, unless you do have one. I said a goal. What do you have a goal for the amount of books you want to read next year? Mine's 50 as always.
Nope.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll hit around the 50 mark though. You seem to consistently do that. So, and then okay, most anticipated book for next year.
It's kind of like a tie. It's like third War Art Saga book if it does come out this year. I'm not sure, like I said. But the new Terry Brooks book is coming out in March, confirmed. It's got a hard release date, and I've got it pre-ordered. Nice. That's another pre-order book. And this one, this isn't really spoiling anything because we know nothing about it. It's going to be about the first druid that forms the whole dang druid order.
Oh,
They
cool.
mention him by name a few times in the books, but his name's Galaphile, and he's like an elf. But like we know nothing about him, and he's the one who like builds Paranor too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're getting some like deep lore backstory stuff. So I'm super excited. I think, like I said, some of Terry's best work is his prequels. Genesis of Shannara was absolutely fantastic. So I have high hopes for this, and this is going to be a trilogy, by the way.
Cool.
Apparently,
you told me about this. Yeah, he's like, isn't he like writing like crazy right now?
Yeah, because as of a few months ago, he's like his assistant, the guy who runs the sign page in Grim Oak Press, the One Small Press, Sean Speakman said that as of now, a few months ago, he was already like 2/3 the way through book 2 out of his trilogy already.
Wow.
Clearly, he wants to make sure it gets done because he's not a spring chicken anymore.
Yeah, he's like in his 80s, right?
He's gonna be 81 this year.
Wow. Good for him.
Yep.
Good for him for still like working on a series, when he's that old.
Oh, I know.
That'll be Brandon Sanderson. He'll be like,
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, George R. R. Martin will be like, I really wish I had. He'll be like 100. I really wish I had written Winds of Winter.
Oh my god. Because that's the thing too. Winds of Winter's not even it. Like he said multiple times, there would probably have to be 2 books to close out the story. It would be Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring.
Yeah, A Dream of Spring. Yeah, poor George. I actually feel bad for him. I don't feel bad for Patrick Rothfuss at all.
No,
He keeps shooting himself in the foot. Anyway, my most anticipated book for next year. I had a hard time with this, so I picked 2 things. One I picked was the next Secret Project book that Brandon's writing.
Yeah, I mean that's up there too, but I feel like that's cheating because Brandon's like one of, if not my favorite.
And then the other one is an older book, but I'm really looking forward to that Hyperion, like special edition. That
yeah.
What you call it? Oh my god, I can't think of the binding. What is it?
The Broken Binding.
Broken Binding. Thank you. The one that they're doing. It looks awesome, just from what they've already showed. So.
Yeah, like watchers, listeners, they're a specialty book company in the United Kingdom. They make like very pretty books, and they've got some subscription services and stuff.
Yep, and they're doing Hyperion, which I'm really looking forward to, for obvious reasons. Given I just, went on and on about Dan Simmons in this video because he's great.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, what series or other books do you want to read next year?
Well, Rob and I are going to try and read Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's a 10-book epic fantasy series, and I own books 1 through 7 right now because the Broken Binding, speaking of them, is doing special colored edge versions of those books, hardcovers, which I don't think hardcovers were even printed when they first came out. It was all softcover. And they're signed, too. So I'll have to showcase them in another video. Hopefully next year's video.
Next year's video, yeah. Exactly a year when we do this massive, ludicrous book video again. You can show off all your Shadows of the Apt. It'll be awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely on my list, too. I'll really look forward to doing that with you. That'll be our big series next year, which I'm hoping, Final Architecture got me down, but talking about the Children of series makes me hopeful, because I'm hoping his fantasy series is going to be really good.
Same. And then as far as any other book I wanted to read, like the other ones I mentioned, like the Vampire Trilogy, the China Medieval Sci-Fi Weird Trilogy, and I have a whole host of other stuff too, but those are the main ones, I think.
Nice. Very cool. For me, I already mentioned a couple. I've already started Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. I'm going to finally do that. That's my first project this year. And then you and I are going to start Shadows of the Apt in February, which will be fun.
Yeah.
Probably like a book a month, something like that, which sounds reasonable. And then I'm going to do the Thrawn trilogy. Might save that towards the end of the year. And then I have just a short list of single books that I want to read, which I'll just showcase really fast. A couple classic sci-fi. I wanted to read this one. I've been meaning to read something else by this dude forever. It's The Siberiad by Stanislav Lem. He wrote Solaris, which is a book I really love. It's a science fiction book. This is just like a fables for the cybernetic age. I heard this is really good. It's just like robot stories, and I love robots, so that'll be fun. I always read one book each by the big three. So Clarke, Asimov, and Heinlein, they're the big three of classic science fiction. They're considered like the forefathers of science fiction and all that. So I want to read an Asimov because I love Asimov. I read one this past year called Caves of Steel, which was also great. A robot book. It's called The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. And I want to read this with Rachel, so I hope we can read this together. So probably that. Songmaster by Orson Scott Card. I finally want to read something of his that is not Ender. I think this is his first novel, or at least his first science fiction novel. And I've heard good things about it, so check that out. And then a couple of gifts from people for Christmas. This was given to me by somebody here. Thank you very much, Matt. And you talked about this book a little bit. Memorials by Richard Chismar. So I might read this during spooky season. So I might wait and do that. And
that's a perfect.
I might read one of those other horror books you talked about on audiobook relatively soon because I'm about ready for another horror book. So I'll talk to you about that later. And then lastly, I was given 2 books by my good friend Dave. And he's like, yeah, I just looked up like modern science fiction that's supposed to be really good and got you some stuff. So Beggars in Spain by Nancy Kress. I've heard of this book. So I'm going to read this soon. Maybe I'll read either this or this one, which he got me, called Sea of Rust by Robert Cargill, another robot book, which I love robots. So I'm probably going to read one of these next after, as far as my physical books, once I'm done Lord of the Rings. So thank you, Dave, for these. And then, obviously, I'm going to try to read Geddy Lee. So that should just about wrap it up. And then I got a whole bunch of other books that I'm planning to read. But, we'll see how it goes.
I did forget to mention I'm reading this right now. It is a detective, private, like PI, like thriller. Basically, there's a guy who is supposedly... Basically, long story short, this PI is hired by like a law firm because one lawyer is convinced that her one client was innocent, but she was like new to the practice at the time. It didn't give him a good defense. Basically, a guy is convicted of raping and killing a woman on a college campus. A lot of like racial stuff because the guy is black and it's like a rich white area.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, things aren't adding up. So, and the thing is, like, he's guilty of a lot of other crimes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But murder wasn't one of them, typically. But, they got a guy with a big rap sheet, and it really looks like he's getting framed because at the crime scene, like, they didn't find any, like, evidence. I'm just going to say evidence. I don't need to get graphic. You can imagine what they didn't find there.
Yeah.
Nothing's adding up. He's like interrogated cops, like people who are related to the witness, and no, it's really good. I'm about like 2/3 of the way through the book. I'm also reading a sci-fi book called War Bodies by Neil Asher, which is neat. It's about like a group of humans who broke off from humanity a few hundred years ago. They live on their own planet, and they've got this doctrine where it's like they want to be more like machine than man. And then they get recruited into this war that, like, the main humans are having with, like, actual aliens. And I just got to a trippy part where, like, the main character, like, literally goes into an alien body while the alien's still alive to, like, connect to him, like, bioorganically to, like, download its thoughts and stuff. And it was kind of horrifying. It was, like, a reverse, like, invasion of the body snatchers. But it was, like, the human robot guy doing it to an alien. I was like, oh, this is creepy.
That sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah, no, it's getting better. I was saying it's so-so, but now it's starting to hook me more.
Sometimes that
Like toward
happens.
and then I'm also reading Sandman by Neil Gaiman. It's a graphic novel series that my friend Michael's lent me. So
Nice. Is
those
it
are
good?
I'm sort of reading three things at once.
I kind of. No, not really. Well, I'm reading The Hobbit, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, which is great. And I am listening to a book called The First 15 Lives of Harry August, which is a newer science fiction book about a guy. Okay, it's basically Groundhog Day. Like a guy who was born in like the 20s, and then he lives till like his 70s, and then he dies, and then he is born again to the same parents in the exact same situation, has all the memories from the next life, and then he like goes a different way with that, and it's getting interesting. It's good. I've already read a few books this year, believe it or not. I recently read the original novel Planet of the Apes that the whole fucking franchise is based off of. It was
That's awesome.
excellent. It was really good. It was really really
Nice.
good. Already probably my favorite book I read this year. So we'll see if that makes it next year. Um, and
I highly
then
recommend the newer movies. I have not seen the older ones, but the newer before this fourth one trilogy was phenomenal, and the fourth one was good too. It's probably at least on par with like the first one of the newer movies, but book two or movie two and three were phenomenal.
you've seen the original movie, right?
I need to read the book too.
Oh man, you gotta see at least the original movie. Do you know how it
Yeah,
ends?
yeah, the big twist. It's been parodied so many times. Spaceballs parodies it, right?
Yeah. You gotta see it though. It is like it really is one of the best science fiction movies ever. And the book is
Mhm.
fabulous. Like the book is really I see where they took from a lot of the movies different pieces out of it. The book
Yeah.
it was written by a French guy.
Oh, very
Pierre
cool.
Bouillet, I think his name is. It was really, really well done. There's twists in that book too, and it was there's some good hard science fiction in it, and
Oh yeah, 'cause, like one of the main twists is that you're not supposed to know it's Earth until like the very, very, very end,
that's
right?
not a thing in the book actually.
Oh really?
Yep. That was all Rod Serling, which
Okay,
makes sense because Rod Serling wrote Twilight Zone, so he like the
gotcha.
original Planet of the Apes is basically a giant Twilight Zone episode if you think about
Mm,
it.
yeah.
Because it's got that twist, and that Twilight Zone was always known for. But yeah, that was good, and I read Old Man in the Sea. Relating to Planet of the Apes, it was narrated by Charlton Heston, which is why I ended
Oh,
up reading Planet of the Apes. Because I was like, okay, wait, I'm going to listen to Old Man in the Sea. And I'm like, man, and I was like, I wonder if Charlton Heston narrated Planet of the Apes like the book. And I looked it up, and I couldn't find it. So I was like, I'm gonna read Planet of the Apes anyway, and I read it and I loved it. I thought it was fabulous. So, and I've also read another science fiction book. So I've already read like 4 books this year, which is pretty
oh
awesome.
wow,
Yeah,
wow.
like I said, January is my palate cleanser. I'm reading shorter books, you know, sort of like one-off type of books.
Yeah, the cool thing about Sandman is Michael has like compendiums. They're split into like 10 volumes. So I read volume one. After I read the Small Vices like detective book, I'm gonna read volume two of Sandman, and then I'm gonna read another book that Brett lent me because Brett lent me that,
Uh-huh.
and then I'm gonna like alternate between Sandman volumes,
Nice. I've done that with
and they're
other
quick,
books before.
yeah, and they're quick reads, yeah, because it's like they're graphic novels, you know.
Yeah, and I'm also sure there's going to be other books like you and I. I mean, I don't know if we'll do it as much as we did last year, but we read a lot of stuff together, which was really cool. I'd love to keep doing that.
I mean,
And
even if we just do Shadows of the App, that's at least 10
well, that's
freaking
10
books.
right there. But even if there's any
Yeah.
individual books that we just like, if we
Hmm.
well, oh, we've also talked about doing Yumi, which we'll do Yumi.
True. Yes, we should.
I might wait like a couple months and then do Yumi in like the spring, and then if you
I'm
want to
cool with
read
that.
if you want to read uh
Dark.
Ember Dark, I can't remember the name of it right now.
God, Amber
Secret
Dark.
Project 5, whatever, yeah. We could always do that together, and I'm sure we could find like a horror book to read or something. So yeah, uh, I'll definitely look forward to doing some more read-alongs with you because it's fun, and hopefully Rachel as well. So, um, I guess, man, that's it. We rambled a bit at
Yep.
the end, but like, yeah, that's our book video. Thanks everybody who's watched this whole thing, which like, props to you. If you're not me, Rachel, or Matt, and you watched the whole thing, like,
Yep.
thanks. And what are
Yep,
your
so long,
top? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna just say so long and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah. Just remember the meaning of life is 42.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks for watching. And what are your top 10 books that you read this year? Did you read 10 books? Did you read 50? Did you read 100? Did you read 1? Did you read none? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks everybody for checking out this video. And I don't know, live long and prosper. That's what I'm going with today.
Thank you, everyone. I would do the Vulcan salute if I can, but I can't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm like McCoy.
Why don't you
just
give
can't-
us like may the force be with you or something? I don't know. You know.
There you go.
Alrighty. Goodbye everybody. Peace.